What? The wooden seat. I'm gonna get free climate funeral at your funeral.
All right, we got quite a few people signed up, so I'll give everyone time to log in before I get started. Plenty of time. Let's see here. There we go. All right, so we got quite a few people signed up, so I want to make sure we give everybody a minute to get in here. I don't miss anybody, but I'll start off that we will have, I'm going to cover the note taking, test taking, and the mastering setting. We do have Dr. Shea joining us as well. I'm Professor Shea, for those that don't know me, but Dr. Shea will be, he's running a little late, but he will be here as well. The good news is I get to start first, so not going to be an issue at all. But we'll start off that throughout this, and again, I have a feeling we're going to have a lot more people joining us based off of the registrations that I've seen coming in. I know there's quite a few people I think are will probably jump on, but feel free as I go through this, as we go through this, by all means, if you have questions, ask. You know, we'll definitely get everything covered. You can put things in the chat. I'm going to actually put the chat up so that I can see it up on the board as well. And feel free. I do have a very large screen so that I will be sure to see whatever you put on there. All right. So I won't miss anything. So by all means, you can put things on the chat if you don't want to interrupt me. But you can also, you know, shout out. By all means, you can put your microphone on, you can put your camera on, and you can speak as well. So make sure that everything gets answered and everything gets covered. All right. Just giving kind of stalling to make sure everyone got logged in here before I jump right in. I don't want to miss anybody. So we are going to record this story. I won't record it each individual person. It's just me and that PowerPoint that's being actually at the end that would actually be showing the recording. We do have a couple people that aren't able to make Wednesdays, and that's fine. So we can provide them the recording and make that available to them. All right. So throughout this, what I'm going to do is, let me get that started. So again, I'm Professor Shea. Dr. Shea will be coming in here a couple minutes from now and joining us. But the big thing with the reason we're doing this, and I talk about this topic frequently, and Dr. Shea, if you figured out my name, is my father. But we do talk about this frequently because it's something that has fallen somewhat by the wayside. I remember going through even high school, my teachers focused on teaching these skills. When I obviously, went through college, same thing. There was always seminars that you went to, and you could pack those rooms on learning these skills. And the big thing that maybe we're finding today is that we do find a lot more of this, a lot more remote communication. And one thing you do lose when we're doing that is the ability to look at that person next to you and say, can you explain that to me? Because what you're missing out on is when you see the person next to you and you're like, I don't know what you're doing, but I need you to explain that because your notes look amazing. And I want to know how to also have amazing looking notes. And I want to make sure that I can study. I'm seeing you study. When a whole college campus just gets so quiet that you're like, oh, there's people like in the corners. And I remember in college I was like hanging from things. But, you know, I think it's time to study, right? We used to find all these quiet nooks, and when you went around, it just gave you that ambiance of it was a studying environment. And sometimes I'm not seeing that so much today. So that's why these kind of seminars are important, to kind of give you those skills, bring some of these skills to the forefront to help you not forget those skills, but to also get the skills that maybe you never got taught in the first place, and also to hopefully get rid of some of the cobwebs that we see where maybe you got the wrong information. Maybe you were told something by someone, and you know, before someone gives me advice, I want to see their transcript to say, did you do well? But also, what was their learning style? Did they tell you everything? Oh yeah, this is how you do it. But maybe they did well, but maybe you missed really how they implemented that or how they did that or things like that. So there's definitely a little bit more to this. So let me move on with the slide here. So first thing I'm going to cover is note taking. Okay, and there are a couple different methods. This is just one, but each slide I'm going to give you a different one here. So the first thing with note taking is that it needs to be organized. But the other piece of the puzzle that you have to keep in mind is that you can't write everything. That's just the reality. Okay, so one piece before you start jumping in and you're scribbling all over paper and we're trying to get everything down and the person's speaking all these big, you know, words and terminology and everything. My question is, how often do you see that same terminology used in the same classes? And if whatever your major is or whatever you're studying, you're probably using the same words repetitively, right? If you're in health sciences, you're probably using certain bones repetitively. When you're in health sciences, you're always talking about blood pressure. Why would I write out the word blood pressure? I'm going to write BP, right? So, or I may just say P for pulse. Or I learn medical terminology where it's PT for patient. Or, you know, with or without. Without is an S with a line over it. A C with a line over it is with. I don't have to write the whole word. I just know I'm using medical abbreviations. In my case, I'm, you know, in the funeral department. Therefore, keywords that I may use would be embalming, or I'm looking at the decedent, or I'm looking at, you know, different aspects of the funeral, casket, things like that. Those are all words that are going to take time to write, which means that whoever's talking to you, whoever you're speaking in the front of the room, as you're trying to take those notes, they're already paragraphs beyond where you are if you're trying to write out full words. So the one thing we recommend is that have a key. And that's okay. You know, go ahead of time. You look at the one thing you're going to notice. I'm going to keep saying is look at the book ahead of time. And I know I'm the biggest hypocrite. You know, I'll show up to something and I'll listen and I'll do it, and you know, maybe I'll look back. And I get that. I do it myself sometimes. But the biggest thing for success is to prepare before you show up. So one thing that would help you prepare with your preparation is to make a key and say, okay, PT equals patient. You know, CK equals casket, or, you know, MN means manifold. You know, you can go across any major, you know. Or if we're talking about accounting, ACC for accounting, debit and credit, DC. Okay, so I just know that, you know, I'm not going to use D or C for anything else. I'm using it for these current things depending on what I'm studying. And I can have my key. Now, after a while, you're not going to need that key anymore. The key is sitting there, but you're going to know what it is because these things are committed to memory. And again, if you're in certain fields, learning the proper abbreviations for that field are going to help you because one, you're practicing not just using your abbreviations, but two, you're using the proper abbreviations for that field of study. Therefore, you're teaching yourself the abbreviations as well at the same time because you're committing those to memory by only using those. Now, and again, that's going to make things a lot faster, and it will help you keep yourself ahead. Now, with this, the Cornell method of note-taking is going to allow you to first put that Q column is using key words, right? So those key words that we're utilizing would be things that you got from the textbook primarily. So I may be going through and I'm putting, and I'll show you an example that I wrote myself. But we're using, key titles of the chapter, right? We're talking about the appendicular skeleton, or we're talking about the peripheral nerves. We're talking about, so whatever it is, I'm going by the title of that section, and then I'm going to go with some of those subtitles, right? So I may put big spaces, because big spaces is going to give me the space that I'm going to need to write during that lecture. That note-taking area is when I'm actually writing during the lecture, when I'm actually taking notes on. But do I need to write everything? No, because what I did was I already wrote some of it in that Q column that's going to give me the key words that I'm looking for, so that I don't have to write those words. And I can organize, because if I'm going back and forth, what I'm doing is I'm organizing things so that they align with what I've already put in the Q column. That saves me writing. That also helps me with proper organization. Maybe I need to go to another page. If there was something that, professor or teacher starts to talk about that I didn't write down, then what I do is I go back and I write that down. I put that in the Q column at the end. But I can flip back and forth and I can do this, right? I can do this really quick. So the other thing is having that bottom piece. That bottom piece is your summary. So now this is something you do afterwards. I come back, I look at my notes, and maybe there's some things that I needed to add in. Maybe I was looking through all of that, but maybe I can summarize a few key points from that page. And I can now have an area where I might want to put some notes, or maybe I want to write something in a way that's going to help me remember it, right? Maybe I can say, this is like a car. It doesn't have to make sense to anybody. It just made sense to me, right? That's all that was important, that made sense to me. Or I can say, this is, the color green that they're referencing. I wrote about it being the color, color green. And now I can say color green equals this shade of green. It's like forest green or something. So that I can just make summaries, or I can, bring all that together. Now, the next thing, and this is the method that I prefer, this is the method I use, is the 3-column method. Now, this is something that you prepare, you notes, and then we bring it together, okay? And what we're going to do is, so that key idea, you have 2 different ways of doing this. The first one would be having key ideas, and that key ideas is that's really given those Q points. That's the same thing to that. Then we have the details. So now we're taking some notes. And maybe I'm doing this ahead of time from the book before I even get to lecture. And maybe I'm writing some details, and I can leave myself really big spaces, right? So I have an area where I can find exactly what I'm looking for. Appendicular skeleton, peripheral nerves, long bones, right? And what I'm doing is now in the details, I'm taking lots of notes, but I'm going to still leave myself massive gaps of space. So when I get to lecture, I don't have a whole lot to write. What I'm able to do is I'm able to focus. I'm able to listen. And I'm able to pay attention to what the person in the front of the room is actually saying, what that professor or teacher is actually saying. Or if I'm at a seminar, I'm able to pay attention to what they said, because I already took my pre-notes. I wrote down as much as I could, and I didn't write so much that I was rewriting the textbook. That defeats the point, right? But what I did write was I wrote key pieces that I need to know. Now that I'm listening, the only notes I have to take are the things that they share a story, right? So a couple of minutes ago, I was sitting in here, and I did have students in the room right up to about a couple of minutes before I turned on Zoom here. And I was talking about bereavement, psychology of grief. And that was what I was discussing. So meanwhile, I'm going through this whole presentation, I'm talking about answering questions is more what I was doing, but I was explaining, psychology of grief. So now what did I do? I took that opportunity to give stories. So I was talking about chronic grief. And I said, all right, let me explain to you this. And I gave a story about, for that situation, I gave a story about where a child was told by their mother that grandma was taken by the angels. Wow, that sounds peaceful, right? Oh, scary too. So what do you think this kid did? This kid came and he put Army soldiers on the windowsill. And the parents come in, they go, why are there Army soldiers all over the floor in front of the door? Why are they in front of the window? What's going on? And the kid turns and he looks and he says, well, the angels took grandma, and I don't want the angels to take me. So that scared that child, right? And that was something that, that was a lesson that I was teaching about how to present information to children regarding grief. But what are you writing? You already wrote about complicated grief. You already wrote in your notes about all of the definitions, the explanations, all of these different things. You didn't have to write the rest of the lecture that I wrote, that I was saying, because you already got that. And I wasn't really giving you something that you could write in the textbook. So you need to make sure you don't forget what's in the textbook. Because why would I talk about something you can get from a textbook? What I did give you was examples. And by giving you that example, you now took the notes on that example. Or maybe you wrote something about kids, soldiers, / this. Did you have to write the whole thing? No, but what it did was it brought back memory and saying, oh yeah, that was the right Professor Shea was talking about. That was the situation. That's the type of grief that can come from a parent saying this. It just helped you remember the story, right? But again, all the rest of the notes were there. Now you have that reflection or area. So now after the lecture, you're going back and you're kind of writing some notes that maybe you now have the time. Now you can sit down and maybe you want to write out the whole story that I told by memory. But you had key points to say, oh yeah, that's right. That was the one that went with that story. This is the one that went with this story, and you're now able to do it. This was the one with the story about the dog where the parents said, ran away, and in all reality, the poor dog got ran over by a car. Again, I work for the jail department here. Keep that in mind. But oh, that's right. Okay, so we took that note, and now we wrote down, and now a little bit more detail. Maybe you looked things up, and that's an important thing too, right? You want to connect the dots. The second method, the second slide piece of that slide that you see, where I have book, connected concepts, and lecture. So I took this and I opened a random book in my office, and I found, it was just a skeletal section of an anatomy book that was sitting on my bookshelf. So what I did was I went through and I found, there's this little paragraph, and I'm going to show you that paragraph in a minute. It's on a future slide, actually. So what I did was I looked and I said, all right, appendicular skeleton, and that was the title of the paragraph. So now I wrote that down. That was in my book. That was saying this column is what I've already taken brief notes on. Pectoral girdle, glenoid cavity. I'm taking brief notes, and now I have that information. Then I skip a column. Now during lecture, again, I may go back and I may write in some of these notes ahead of time so that I don't have to write them later, right? Now, do I want to overwhelm that first column? Probably not, right? I want to make sure that when I'm looking for the word pectoral girdle, that I can find the word pectoral girdle. I'm not looking among all these words trying to find it. Now, colors, shapes, symbols, those definitely help. But I don't want to be boggling my mind trying to find this when I'm trying to study. I'm looking and saying, very clearly, I can see the titles. The bold words are what I'm putting into that area. Maybe I put some other words in there so that I, again, for notes. But in that lecture area, now I maybe put a few pre-lecture notes in the lecture area. Again, things I know that the professor is going to talk about. And I know that that when they're going to talk about that, I don't have to write it. Now only have to add the stories, the examples, the things that make sense. And then connecting the concept. That's that middle column. And that's a middle column for a reason. And the reason that it's a middle column is because I'm connecting the two things together. I took notes from my book. I took notes from that. Now I'm going to go back and say, all right, pectoral girdle, this is what he was talking about during lecture. These are some of the pre-notes I took about that. These are the things that, these are maybe some of the stories, the examples. Maybe he was holding that up. Maybe I'm holding a pectoral girdle, and in the other room is a lab. Okay, I'm in a classroom right now, but the other side of this wall is my lab. So now I'm walking around and I'm holding the pectoral girdle, or maybe I have my skeleton and I'm talking about the pectoral girdle, and I'm pointing. And as I'm pointing at that pectoral girdle, I'm saying, you can see this prominence. Okay, that prominence lines up with this. This prominence is for this. When you get this type of fracture, the fracture is going to go through this part of the bone. So now what you're doing is you're making little doodles, you're making little things, that's your lecture notes. But now you're going back and you're saying, okay, maybe I wrote things and maybe you put little symbols and saying, hey, this is a concept that he described it, but I didn't really grasp it. Maybe I missed something. So now you go back and that connecting concept is where you use Google. right? And be careful. You're going to find your next door neighbor's website. Anybody can write a website today. So be careful what you find. Get reputable sites, obviously. But I'm going to look that up and I'm going to find that concept. And when I find that concept, I'm now going to explain it. Or maybe I'm going to find it in different words that make sense to me. Or maybe I want to make something connecting and saying, this is the part, I was pointing at it, but maybe now you're saying, okay, I'm finding pictures online. Maybe I'm looking at a textbook, I'm going to remember this as that is the dip in the bone at this point, or whatever it is, you make something up. Or maybe you put an acronym, right? One question I always ask people is, how many feet are in a mile? Anybody know? Off the top of your head, does any of you know how many feet are in a mile? And you guys can throw things in the chat. You can speak, by all means. Scream it out. Anybody know? 5,280, exactly. Now, I'm going to tell you how I remember that. Because I was in grade school and I had to remember that among many, many other things. And what did I do? I called my grandmother. And I said, Grammy, I need to know how many feet are a mile. She goes, oh, that's easy. It is? She goes, yeah. 5 people went into the desert, 2 ate nothing. I said, excuse me? She goes, 5 people went into the desert, 2 ate nothing. 5,280. Now I remembered something. So I use this acronym. So now I may write that in the connecting concept. Call your grandmother. Grandma's amazing at these kind of things. And you wrote something in that helped you study that because it gave you something and you're like, oh yeah, that's right. And now you commit to memory. And now, without even thinking about that, you know how many feet are in a mile. Okay. So these are all different things that connect. This is also a great place to put doodles, right? So now you go back and you're like, okay, now I'm going to take the time. I'm going to draw her. Or maybe they have nice little printers. You can print out little like things and stickers and things like that. Or maybe you get some, paste and you print out a little piece of paper and you can stick that. And it gives you a nice little clear area where you can stick a picture of the bone or a picture of the heart or a picture of the accounting equation or whatever you want. That gives you that. But that, again, that's your after the fact moment to work with. Right. So the next thing we have is one thing you need to keep in mind is color and style play a big role in how you see things. So if you can see how this is, again, handwritten notes in both areas, one of the one on the left, the Cornell, both of these are Cornell note-taking methods, but you can see how that color makes it a lot more prominent for you to visualize, right? So if I'm looking at something, and on this case, I'm looking for direction. You can see they drew a compass, right? That kind of cool. Language, direction, time, quantity. So now when I'm looking through my notes, it makes it, rather than a whole bunch of black text, on white paper, that's going to make it so much easier for me to say, that's what I'm looking for. And maybe a little doodle, like they drew a little compass, right? That's right, north, south, east, west. Okay, got it. But that color allows you to see the little doodle, and again, as we're all make doodles of sailboats and whatever. Doodle your name, doodle your words. So make that pretty, use different colors if you can. And obviously these things can be difficult because you have time, you're trying to listen to this person that's rambling on, talking. Some of these things you can do ahead of time. Again, you already know that the professor is going to talk about quantity and time, and he's going to talk about certain engineering methods or certain bones or certain things. Make massive spaces. You can go ahead of time and start doing these titles in colors that mean something to you. Going back and maybe highlighting things in different colors, or take your notes and then you can rewrite your notes in different colors. You take them and then you take another notepad. This is my notepad for class, and this is my notepad where I'm going to take those, but I'm going to rewrite them in a fancier way. Or maybe I'm going to type them up after the fact and I'm going to make them pretty so that I have something I can walk through. One, by looking back at them and rewriting them is going to help you with some level of retention. But 2, by making them pretty, that's what I'm going to call that, making them colored, using different styles definitely helps your attention track. So if I'm always using blue, means the key word. Green means the definition. Purple means out of that definition, I'm pulling out key words that I want to have stand out. Because if I'm looking for what key word goes with flat bone, well, obviously I want to write flat bone in a different color than the rest of the definition because I need flat bone to stand out. But I don't want that to be the same color as the key word because that's going to distract me from the key word that I'm trying to find. So these are all different methods, that do definitely help and play a role in that again. But you can see where on this they did definition, the differences and things like that, and organized all of that. All right, so with highlighting, which one of these do you like? These are the same passage from the same book. This is the exact paragraph that I took. I took a picture of my textbook with a phone. I cropped it down to the exact paragraph that I wrote notes on for that 3-column method. This is the exact section that I was referencing when I wrote that 3-column method. Which one of those highlights do you like? What do you think? Which one do you like? You like the second one? Yeah, I agree. I like the second one too. Okay, so the one on the right, the one with less highlighting, is much easier. Now, on the left, did I highlight? Yeah, did I highlight keywords only? Did I leave things out? Yeah, I did. I left a lot of things out. But I've gotten textbooks. You go to the bookstore and you get the used textbook, and you're like, what the hell? They literally highlighted the paragraph. What good did that do? But the one on the left, did I highlight keywords? Yes. Did I highlight less parts of those keywords on the right? Yes. So what happened was, instead of saying, the whole thing, all I needed was, I know girdle was part of it. I just needed pectoral. So when I'm looking through, I'm looking for the part of that word that I need to stand out when I'm trying to find something quick, right? I know the whole chapter is about skeleton, so obviously I don't need to highlight the word skeleton. Do I need to highlight appendicular skeleton in that paragraph below it? No, because I already know that appendicular. I already know that that's the part of what I'm looking for. So highlighting that would be redundant in that case, but it's also going to distract me from this. And of course, you can use different color highlighters. I used yellow for this. But, could I, did I need the whole word? No, just upper, lower. Do I need limbs? No, because I can read that. Again, the one thing with highlighting is I'm not losing the rest of the word. I can still read everything. All I need to do, if I don't highlight it, it's not going to disappear. What I need to do is just highlight the keywords I'm looking for. All right, I'm looking for, upper limb. Oh, I found it. Okay, I'm looking for, where shoulder girdle was. Okay, that was, thing. But I didn't highlight, if you notice, I left pectoral girdle out because I already knew that was the paragraph. I'm going to read the whole paragraph when I'm doing this. But I'm just scanning the textbook, trying to find the word shoulder girdle, because that was the keyword I was doing, okay? Whereas on the left, that would have been, even though I didn't still highlight the whole paragraph, I still only highlighted keywords. It was just very hard for me to find that word shoulder girdle because I'm reading a lot of highlighting for me to get there. Now, this is important, visual listening. Okay, we're in how many of you use AI in your daily lives? You use AI for different things, note-taking or whatever you have, note-taking. We have it do our schedules. Maybe you want some pretty pictures. How many of you use AI for different things? You do? It's become a big part of our lives. Even if you don't realize you're using AI, you're using it. We realize AI is generating most things. If you just type in something into Google, I need the difference between debit and credit, the accounting methods. I guarantee, I'm going to tell you right now, Google now has AI on the top of that. First thing that comes up is AI. And by the way, in my class, the class goes, well, Google told me this. And I do encourage them to look things up. I got to teach a exam-taking class, board competency for the licensure exam. So, one of those is, if you don't know the answer on the practice quizzes, your goal is to look it up, because I want you to learn not just the material. I don't want you to know that answer, because that answer is important, but that answer is not nearly as important as the fact that if you do know that answer, then you probably didn't know everything around that answer, right? So going back to that paragraph, right? If all of a sudden, and this is the back slide, but if all of a sudden you didn't know about where the pectoral girdle articulates, right? So each upper limb articulates with the trunk of the shoulder girdle, and you didn't know that, then you probably also don't know that the pectoral girdle consists of a broad, flat scapula or shoulder blade. So if all of a sudden you go back and you're like, oh, that was, and we do this all the time, right? We get a question wrong on an exam, and you go and you're like, and you go and you, I'm hoping you look it up. I know not everyone does, but I'm hoping you looked it up. And you went in there and you looked that answer up, and you're like, oh, that's right, okay. Articulates with the trunk of the trunk. Ah, that's right, okay, got it. But if you didn't know that, you probably didn't know the next sentence. So always look things up and don't just find the answer. Read the whole paragraph around it, because means you're missing something else. Something else that's going to show up on a future quiz. Something else is just obviously you're preparing for life, not just taking quizzes here, but there's something else you're missing. And that's going to be the next question, because you know what the next quiz or your final exam or what your licensure exams or anything are going to ask you? They're going to ask you that second sentence, not the first one that you got already, okay? So keep that in mind. So with AI, again, this paragraph read it. And I brought my students and they looked up the answer, and the first thing they said, well, this is what Google said. I said, oh, really? I said, what did you ask Google? They said, well, I asked Google, what the difference between this and this were. Okay. Now I'm here on my computer and I typed it in. I said, difference between, I'm going to say debit and credit. Difference between debit and credit in the accounting method. I typed in exactly what the student tells me. Sure enough, boom, up comes Google, and I'm reading the AI message on the top, and it was wrong. Maybe not by that, I don't remember what the actual question was that they were asking. But it was, whatever it was wrong. It was telling me the difference between two things, and it was actually wrong. So what was it pulling from? It was pulling from heaven only knows what websites or blogs or whatever it was pulling from. Now, did it have something? Yes, but it was missing key pieces of information, because it was automatically pulling, but it didn't have a mind of its own to know that answer. It didn't know why it was wrong. And over time, if people call it out on that, then it's going to say, oh, I'm wrong, and it's going to learn the right answer. And that's how AI does develop. But how do you know what websites you go to, right? Anybody can type about anything. Honestly, anybody can put out information. So the key things is making sure you have the correct information. But back into AI, or just closing your eyes. So now here's a paragraph, the top right next to the words visual listening, that's a paragraph. I typed that. I was in my office and I gave myself a little miniature lecture, and I typed as I spoke to myself. And that was just a visual thing. That would be something that every day I would stand there and I would say, okay, and I would have a heart in my hand, right? I have a model heart, and as I'm holding that model heart in my hand, I say, okay, as you guys can see, the heart's 4 chambers are wrapping around. Okay, they don't look like the 4 boxes that your teacher drew on the board, in the classroom. You can see that the chambers actually wrap around. They're actually in front of and behind each other. They're not next to each other. It's not that pretty. Now the blood's going to enter through this vena cava and it's going to go into the right atrium. And as you can see, the valve here in the right atrium is going to prevent blood from moving backwards as it moves through the ventricle. Now, when I'm doing that, I realize I'm not holding a heart in my hand at the moment. But as I'm doing that, I'm pointing at the chordae tendae. I'm pointing at the very things that hold that valve in one direction, that prevent that valve from prolapsing and going back on itself. I'm holding them in my hand. I'm pointing at them. I'm playing with them between my fingers as I speak. Okay? But with your eyes closed, you never saw that. AI never saw what I was playing with. They never saw that I was playing with these various strings within the heart that are preventing that. And I'm saying this prevents that. This is the magic piece that prevents those from prolapsing. I'm sorry, but AI has not a clue what this is. AI doesn't read that. And if you were moving around and you're half listening and you're doing something else, you also don't know what this is, okay? As I'm holding that in my fingers. Blood that moves through the pulmonary circulation before re-entering the heart. And then the coronary arteries are fed by a sinus, just as the blood passes into the left atrium through the pulmonary vein. All right, so where's the pulmonary vein? Did you see what I was pointing at? Did you see when I held that heart in my hand, where that left atrium was? Did you see that hole that I pointed on, the model, as I walked around the classroom, and I walked around and I said, you guys can see this sinus. You can see the coronary sinus right here that feeds the coronary arteries. And as I'm doing that, I'm touching the coronary arteries. For those that don't know, that's the heart's own blood supply. Okay? When you get a heart attack, that's what the coronary arteries are what's getting blocked. Not the blood that rushes through the heart, but the heart's own blood supply. So now we get a blockage to that. Right? And I'm pointing at something. Now, visually, you don't have no clue what I'm talking about unless you're seeing that. Because you see me walking around the room, pacing the room, pointing at something that gives you a visual. But you have to have your eyes open. And AI only gets the words I say. Okay, I do something during orientation here. I walk around with a pen. I make everyone actually close their eyes. That is the exercise. And I do walk around with a pen. And as I pace the room with a pen, that they close their eyes before I pull the pen out of my pocket, and I describe that pen as the best pen to do a task with. And you can see the colors of this pen and the reflection of this pen. And you can see the color of the ink of this pen. And I write on myself, on my hand. You can see how this ink, the color of this ink is the perfect ink for paper. And then I make everyone open their eyes, I put the pen away, and I make them take notes on what they did. They have to tell me what that pen looks like. How many of them do you think can tell me what that pen looks like? Not many, huh? Right? Because I did describe, but every word I used was, see this color. Well, they can't see the color. See the ink. They can't see the ink. Okay? So you got to be careful about a lot of these automated things, that we come across. So on the left here, you can see eyes closed AI. You can see what notes, and I took my paragraph and I just typed out keywords about this. These are the keywords I could have pulled from that. Does that make any sense to you? Wraps around? Wraps around what? Blood enters vena cava, okay. Right atrium. I don't really know how this all goes together. But meanwhile, you're sitting in the classroom and you're listening to this, and as you're listening to this, you're writing. I didn't write, I'm going back and forth. I'm going through and I'm saying, and the blood goes through here, and then I'm talking about something else, and I'm going this. Meanwhile, you're organizing your notes. And by organizing your notes, you're writing 4 chambers. And then you're adding to that, but you're leaving yourself a big gap. And then you're writing, the valves do not, the valves won't invert. And you're telling me why, right? You're saying that the according to 10 are there, that they hold the valves in place, right? That was a note that you put down here, but meanwhile, you kept things organized. But even though I was following things through in order, and I pointed at the valves in the middle of that, what you did was you went on and you kept that. And look at the way that I wrote this specifically. I was using codes, symbols that made, and obviously I typed this out. You can do the same thing on paper, but if you're typing things, that's quick to type. These are all keys on the keyboard that make things easy, right? 4 chambers of the heart, order of blood flow. In other words, that's telling me I put them in order. Okay, that's reminding me years from now when I read this that I put them in order. Right atrium. From superior vena cava, VC. I just made an abbreviation and made things so much quicker. I didn't have to write vena cava. That's a very long word to write. And you know what? The professor was already through the entire other end of the heart by the time you wrote vena cava. VC, done. Now I'm making my little abbreviation over here and then know what VC means. I did that ahead of time because I knew that was going to be a word that was going to be used. Now I have it goes from the right ventricle. Now you notice that I put the next things in parentheses because these are not chambers of the heart. But that's what I told myself, that it goes from the right ventricle to the pulmonary artery to the pulmonary vein. Now I did leave out the lung, and I probably should have written lungs in there in my notes, and I didn't do that. But sure, lungs could be in there. So pulmonary artery, pulmonary vein, and then I used a different type of bracket. And by using that different bracket, this didn't require me to write big long paragraphs that says, this is where the coronary sinus / or it goes into the coronary sinus atrium. I didn't. What I used a different symbol. And by using a different symbol, that indicated to me that this was different than the rest. And that symbol is indicating that this is not just the vein or the artery, that this is kind of like the next step of it, but there's like an intermediary step. Then from there, it goes into the left atrium, left ventricle. Then I put aorta in brackets as well. Because again, that was leaving the heart. So now I'm indicating that this is not a chamber of the heart, and I'm using symbols to remind myself that's not a chamber of the heart, that is now leaving the heart and going to the atrium. Because I use the same symbol I use for pulmonary artery and vein. So again, this is just ways of speeding things up and making it easier for you to read things. And then I came back later and I started drawing things. And, or maybe I had some time and, as the person's talking about things I already took notes about, now I'm sitting there drawing myself a little pretty hard or something, or maybe I go back and now I want to think of my notes. I went back and I found good images and I start drawing the heart and I start labeling the heart. But the nice thing about, maybe you're not the best artist, that's fine. Go back and find the Google image, put the Google image in there, print it out and paste it, put a little paste on there and stick it on. They sell little printers that sell little sticker things now. You can do exactly that. Or maybe you have electronic notes. Maybe you transferred your notes electronically, or maybe you took them electronically. That's something I'm about to talk about. So you took your notes electronically. So now afterwards, I go back and I organize and I find a Google image afterwards that has all of these chambers and all of these pieces. And that's exactly what these are. These are images I Googled. I know they're hand-drawn because I literally Googled I need a hand-drawn image because I wanted it to look hand-drawn on this board for my demonstration that you hand-drew something. But you could do the same thing. I could find much better imagery that was real images. Google it, boom, throw it in, and I throw it in my electronic notes. Now I have a reference that goes along with that. But again, do I want to write everything? Yeah. Because if I'm going to write everything, I might as well just read the textbook. And you should read the textbook, obviously, but I might as well just get through the textbook. All right. So, next. How many of you take your notes electronically versus handwritten? How many of you are electronic and how many of you are handwritten notes in a notebook? And then there's also the middle. How many of you are handwriting your notes on an electronic device? So typing it, handwriting it, or handwriting it on an electronic device. What are we doing? All right. So exactly. So I like, again, we all have our preference, and these are pros and cons. Pros are in green and cons are in red. So we have our pros and cons for each, and I didn't label every pro and con that's out there. I just kind of hit some of the highlights here. But again, there's an intermediary. There's handwriting it on your electronic device as well. Now, let's start with electronic note taking. There's good things. There's good notes. There's Notely. There's what's really cool now. You have the ones unfortunately it does cost some money. You have the notebooks that have the electronic access. So you're writing actual notes on paper. That's beautiful. But meanwhile, they're going to your tablet or your computer electronically. So you have handwritten notes. You still get that handwritten pad. Obviously, special paper, special pen. But then it goes over electronically. So you now have a digital version of that using the pen as picking up on what you're doing. That's really cool. Okay, so we can get really techie with this as well. But with that, obviously, what happens? There's always going to be the cons of the fact that you are working with technology, right? Things glitch. How often do you go to jump on a meeting, and all of a sudden, as you go to jump on that meeting, you realize that Zoom's going to do their massive update? Just as it never happens when you don't want to be on the meeting. It only happens when you're jumping on the meeting that's like a massive interview for the job, your dream job, or whatever the case may be, right? That's when it updates. So it's the same thing. You're dealing with technology. Things glitch. Things need updates. Things need, things aren't compatible, or whatever the case may be. You have so many things open that you're trying to balance your life, and now things are just working really slow, and your notes are not picking up, and it missed notes, things that the pen would have done. Now you're missing significant pieces of your notes because it was freezing and didn't pick things up. Ah, crap. Well, that sucked. It's also a distraction, right? And I'm starting with the cons. Again, there's cons for written notes as well. There's a distraction, right? How many of you have things popping up on your screen constantly saying, email, right? Now, when I'm teaching, I can sit in my office all day long and I get a few emails here and there, and I got it open on my screen. But as soon as I sit down here and I'm teaching, my phone is going ding, 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 ding. And I'm like, seriously? Right? So all of those distractions, all those notifications are things that are distracting you from what you should be paying attention to. Or you're sitting there and you're like, you know what? Let me look this up. Well, should you be looking up that now? Or could maybe we wait? Okay? When you have paper notes, you're just doing it and you're like, okay, I'm focused. Right? Maybe you're not, but you're focused. But in that, you're like, you know what? It's too easy to just look something up right away. Oh, I want a photo of the heart. Let me look that up right away. How about I put a note in there in brackets that says, find picture of heart. Okay? But that distraction ability is there. And of course, we have beyond glitches, data loss, where all of a sudden something, doesn't save properly or something. Again, you don't have the paper. You could lose that, right? If all of a sudden the software doesn't work, you lose it. Or there's a data glitch, something didn't save, you lose it. Your computer crashes, you lose it. So now you've lost something. The battery, right? I mean, my computer hasn't been plugged in nowadays. If I don't have it plugged in, it doesn't last long. So, but the reality is that now, how easy is it to find a plug? I'll tell you right now, every one of these tables going down has a plug next to it. Why? Because I'm the one that worked with the architect, and I thought that went through. Okay, but not all these tables do. Only the table up here and the tables back there. Right? We have the casket for our mock parlor sitting on the side here. So those people can't use their laptops because there's no plugs. I'm smart enough that conference table on the back has a plug right in the floor underneath it. Okay, again, I worked with the architect. But that doesn't mean that that's the kind of room you're going to be in. The reality is that we're very reliant on technology. And I realized that, and I thought it through when I had this area designed and built. But I was in Washington State. I was in Tacoma, Washington 2 weeks ago now. And I'm in the conference room, and they said, wow, you're not going to get work done? I said, no, my laptop doesn't last that long. So if I have my laptop, it's got the battery life. I went over, I left it plugged into the wall so I had enough battery life. So if I needed it, I could go get my laptop, I could work on it, and then I could go back to the wall and let it charge. I had a plug, but it was on a wall well behind me. It wasn't near my table. So that puts me at a disadvantage if my notes were all going to be electronic. And if I was relying on taking electronic notes, that wouldn't have worked very well for me from where, based off of the fact that the tables were not near any plugs and that we were all fighting over the very plugs that were on the wall, right? Everyone was taking turns with those plugs. So, obviously thinking things through and realizing that, that I kept, some note cards in my pocket that I could take some notes on if I needed to remember something, or I, did it on my phone. But what are the pluses? What are the pros of electronic? It's easy to organize, right? So that's the nice thing, is that you can go back, you can organize it, you could have folders. I mean, you don't have to carry a whole lot of things. You got your computer, you got your tablet, you got something that you now have the ability to go back and you could have all those things organized in folders. So I have one thing to carry. I'm not carrying, notebooks and notebooks and notebooks that are half empty. I'm not carrying all those with me. So there's obviously benefits to that. I can go back and I can move things around. I can correct my notes if I didn't like how it was. I can retype things, or maybe I, take out some of the abbreviations and I retype them after the fact, or, maybe those big spaces and I could replace them rather than handwritten. It's neater usually if you're typing something than try and deal with, my handwriting especially. I can't, write. My life depended on it. So definitely not going to read my handwriting afterwards. Multimedia, as I said, you could take a picture of a heart and I can put that in. Now, the question is collaboration. What is collaboration? It's the fact that you can take notes as a group. And this is something that people are utilizing more and more. And there's a benefit to that. So now what you do is, instead of just taking notes, use a Google Doc. And we all share the Google Doc. Or at least you share it with your friends. Maybe not your people you don't like in the class, but share it with your friends. So maybe we all work together, right? So my job is to focus on these key pieces, and I'm typing these parts of I'm adding to the Google Doc, and I'm adding key factors. You're a quicker typer, so your job is to focus on the stories. And somebody else's job is to sit there and try to clean it up and organize it, maybe after the fact, so that they can be pretty and colorful, right? They're really good at that kind of area, and they do that after the fact. But they're not really good at paying attention and typing during the class, but their job is to help you get it organized after the fact. Or their job is to go back and find the photos. Or maybe you have somebody in the class that's a really good artist, and they're sitting there drawing, on paint or something. They're drawing all these images of whatever's going on in the classroom, and they're being really quick with their artistic skills. And then they're able to take those and they're able to input them into your notes. So now 3 or 4 of you are now benefiting from each other's skills, but you each took a piece of the puzzle. And that's something that people are doing now as well, that works together. Or people will put you'll see sometimes with the notes like that, somebody will be typing something and they'll put a question mark and somebody else will replace the question mark because they heard what the professor said, but the first person typing didn't. So it works well. Okay, but you have collaboration. you know, or you take note, you know, whatever the case may be. Now, obviously we have cons with handwritten notes as well, right? And this also crosses over to electronic handwritten, to the fact that, you know, you do have to write really quick. You do have to have that, but it can be messy. It can be rushed. It could be reviewed. But then again, can you write quicker or can you type quicker, right? It's harder to organize it, right? You're writing and then you're like, oh, I ran out of space, right? So now you're writing a merge and you're creating another space, right? Using the note-taking methods that I mentioned. So do you have the space left, or did you have too much? Again, always leave yourself a generous amount of space to work. But did you have that? Right? Now you're also looking through your notes. You can't find things. Whereas if I have electronic notes, if they're typed, or if you take your handwritten notes and you type them afterwards, I can hit, you know, Control F, find. Nope. Now I just pulled up and I just found, you know, appendix, and I found all the areas where appendix was mentioned, and now I know exactly, I can find things much quicker in my notes. So that's the beauty of electronic notes. The downside is you have to type it. I can also hit Control R and boom, I can replace everything that I wanted to replace. So maybe every time maybe I put the letter, you know, AZB, and that meant, you know, to me that meant something. So now I just Control R, and I replace the AZB with whatever the item was that I was abbreviating for that day. Maybe it's not an official abbreviation and I want that word changed. So things like that can be a lot easier with that too. Obviously it's hard to share, but that never stopped us, because electronic note taking is very recent and we've been sharing notes for a very long time. So yes, it can still be done, but obviously the ability to collaborate is not there. But more than anything, it reduces the distraction. You only have your paper. I don't have electronics. I don't have all these distractions. I don't have all these things. My email dings and I'm like, I don't want to check that, right? Facebook, oh, somebody's doing something. It's someone's birthday. Hold on, you know? So all of those distractions go away. It gives you the flexibility that you're not trying to worry about the fact that electronic, right? Now I'm trying to figure out, where did something go? Now I'm trying to scroll something and I'm trying to find it, right? My computer's taking it. I can just flip the pages and I can go exactly where I want to be. It gives you the flexibility to write or draw, whereas electronic, you're limited by the space, right? I can't just, all of a sudden I get too close and my hand is, you know, so it does give you that ability. But more than anything, the most important part is retention, right? It gives you much better retention than typing. It's proven time and time again that if you're handwriting something, that you will remember it. That's why all the joke was back in the day, the teacher made you go up and write your punishments on the board. I will not swear. I will not swear. Why? Because they believed that it would commit it to your memory that you should never swear, right? There was value to that. There was absolute value to that. But the, you know, but it does give you better retention because you're handwriting it. It gives you that skill level. All right. All right, so next, this is Dr. Shea. So he's going to cover a little bit more of studying, and he will also cover test taking skills as well. And then I'm going to go into more depth of some of the more creative study skills. You know, so he'll cover how to be a good studier, and I'm going to cover how to be creative with it. Yep. No, I don't. Just keep hitting any button. Yeah. Okay. I do have the clicker, but it's in my bag.
All right.
Yeah.
I think it actually. Oh, so I came up with the first slide. Okay. Good evening. I'm Dan Shea, Dan's father, and I'm a retired emergency physician. And this, you know, I'm an occasional guest lecturer for the funeral services program. I typically speak about diseases, so this may be a little bit of an odd topic for me, but the way I got into this is that about 30 years ago, I was lecturing for and running a review course for board certification. And someone suggested that it would be nice to have a lunch talk, a short lunch talk on test taking techniques. And I thought that was kind of an odd request because I didn't realize there really were any techniques to it. I figured, you know, study, you take an exam, what more is there to it? But, you know, all through, you know, college and medical school, maybe high school, I had friends, very intelligent, who did well, but who would say, oh, I'm a terrible test taker. And I always just thought that was an excuse. I figured they were just saying that because they didn't score as high as they wanted to. But anyways, after this request, I went and I did some research, and it turns out that there have been studies done on test taking, and it turns out that there really are good test takers and bad test takers. The technical term, or the term they prefer, is high scoring test takers and I guess low scoring test takers. But anyhow, turns out there really are good test takers. And what it really boils down to is that the good test takers have certain characteristics in common, and the bad test takers have certain characteristics in common. And I think the bottom line, when you look at all of it, is that the good test takers tend to avoid making certain mistakes that the bad test takers tend to make. Now, again, just to clarify, a high scoring test taker, okay, that doesn't mean someone who can not study and just walk in and ace an exam without studying. Just like if you're a really, really, really good athlete, you still have to practice. If you don't practice, no matter how good an athlete you are, if you don't practice, you're not going to be all that good, in the game. So same thing. What it really does mean is that if you have two people who are equally intelligent and have the same knowledge, they both studied the same, they both know the same stuff, the one who is a high scoring test taker is going to get an extra 2, 4, 6, 8, whatever points on the exam than the poor test taker. And again, it really boils down to that good test taker is not going to make some simple mistakes that the other guy's going to make. And, points count. 2 points can make the difference between an A and a B and a C, or even failing and passing. And, maybe in a semester long course, you fail one exam by a couple of points, maybe it's not that big a deal. But let's say you're taking a certification exam. Like I know the funeral students have to take a licensing exam, nurses have to take certification exams, etc. It's a standardized exam that costs them, I think it's $650 to take, and they can't get licensed until they pass it. So if they fail it by 1 point, there's no mercy. You fail it by 1 point, you have to take it again, another $650, plus you have to take another day off, you have to study for it, etc. So, don't give up even 1 or 2 points if you can avoid it. All right, let's talk about how the good news that I want to mention is that if you are not a good test taker, you can learn these techniques. You can learn how to be a good test taker. So that's the good news. This is all learnable. I guess the bad news is you still have to study. So we're going to talk a little bit first, before we get into test taking. We're going to just talk a little bit about good study habits and hit some of the highlights here. All right, here we go. All right, so the first rule is to relax. You're in college. You must have some decent study habits, some decent test taking techniques. Otherwise, you probably wouldn't have made it this far. On the other hand, when you go from high school football to college football, or college football to pro football, whatever, you have to up your game. You're at a different level now, and sometimes what worked for you before may not entirely work for you that next level up. So it is good if you can, no matter how good you are, if you can improve on it, that's even better. So the certain principles, pretty simple, but one of them, I think one of the most important, is stick to a schedule, and even more importantly, avoid distractions. Okay, find some way to avoid distractions. Now, if you're on campus, that might mean going to the library, or only studying in your room if your roommate's not there. If you're in a home, it might be just locking yourself in a room and telling the rest of the family to stay out and keep the family dog out, and so on and so forth. Also, if you can turn off your cell phone, turn it off, okay? Or at the very least, if you have to put it on because you're on call or whatever, then don't be checking your text messages. Don't be checking, I don't know, what is it, Instagram or whatever else, or email. Just put it aside, and don't do that on the computer either, right? During this time, whatever it is, whether it's an hour, 2 hours, whatever that you schedule yourself for, all you're going to do is study, and you're going to avoid distractions. The other thing is, if you're doing a good job, you say, I'm going to study for the next hour, and you go in there and you do a good job, reward yourself. Have a bowl of ice cream, watch your favorite show, go for a 5-mile run, whatever works for you. as a reward, go ahead and do that. But you only reward yourself if you do a good job. All right. Is there a way of moving that screen there that's showing what I'm saying? Is there a way of moving that out of the way or something?
It's not moving at the beginning.
Oh, okay, yeah. All right. Now, the other thing, even though I know this is a joke, but it's real. Believe it or not, your brain does get full. Some studies have shown using PET scans that if someone heavily concentrates for a long period of time, a substance called glutamine builds up in your frontal cortex in the front of your brain, and it makes it difficult for you to continue concentrating. So your brain really does get full. And, if you are studying and you're reading the same paragraph 3 times and you still don't know what it says, and I know that's happened to everyone, it happens to me, certainly, then your brain is full. Take a break. If you've read the paragraph 3 times and you still don't know what it says, reading it 4 or 5 times isn't gonna, help. So get up, go out, walk around the block, get some fresh air, walk around the block, have a bowl of ice cream, whatever, again, whatever works for you. You might only need 5 minutes. That often 5 minutes, fresh air, just clear your head. That's all you need. Now you're good to go again. Some people might need a little longer. Again, what works for you, but just, take a short break. All right. Next thing, survey the material to be studied. Okay, so if you're going to be studying, I don't know, let's say 20 pages, just quickly flip through the 20 pages just to see what it involves. Let's say you have an hour to study, 2 hours, whatever the time is. Say, okay, this stuff, isn't too bad. This area I'm really going to have to focus on, and it might be toward the end of it. So it's just part of it is just kind of planning your time and just seeing what you're up against and getting a sense of what you need to spend a little more time on and so forth. So that should just take you a minute or two. Just do a quick survey. Then, as you're going through, as you're reading the chapters, think of the material as answers to questions. And now, a lot of what I'm going to talk about now is how do you cement this information into your brain? Okay, I mean, if you're just, you can just read it, whether you're reading the newspaper or reading some article or whatever, that's not that important. A lot of it, you're kind of reading up, you're not going to remember, much of it. You want to have this material kind of cemented into your brain or glued into your brain so that you remember it. And there's different ways of doing that. One of them is, I think there's the show Jeopardy, I think, right, where I think they give you an answer, and they give you the answer and you come up with a question. Okay, if I remember right. So do it that way. As you're reading the material, say, okay, what would be a question where this would be the answer? And that just helps cement it in there. The other thing is, again, read actively. Okay, as you're reading, don't just read it, but actually say, okay, well, it's saying this, but why is that? Why does it say this? Why does this work that way, etc.? Just kind of question it again, just, helps you to understand it better. And Dan already spoke about, highlighting and taking notes. I agree. If you handwrite something, it does cement it into your brain better than if you're just doing it. I know, like if even at home now, I'm retired, so I don't have to do a lot of stuff, but I still have my to-do list, right? And I tend to handwrite my to-do list because it makes more of an impression on me than if I type it, and I tend to pay more attention to it. The other thing is highlighting, as he mentioned. If you highlight everything, then nothing is important. So highlight the stuff that you feel like you need to come back to. Like say if you're going to do a quick review the morning of the exam or the night before the exam, you're going to take 20 minutes to do a quick review. That's where you want to highlight the stuff that you need to come back to, that you're going to hit, in that final review. All right. Also, recite the material in your own words. So you read a paragraph, try to re-say that paragraph in your own words. Again, just helping you to not only understand it, because you have to understand it in order to put it into different words, but it also kind of cements it into your brain. And reciting leads to recalling. So recite it, put it in your own words, etc. And then you're going to want to do a final review. Okay, so I'm assuming that you have an exam, you're going to study for it over a period of perhaps several days, maybe an hour here, an hour there, whatever. But before you take the exam, the night before or the morning of, perhaps you want to do a final review. And what I used to do is, I mean, we used to, like in med school, we'd have like basically it would be like a final exam every week. So you'd study for it all week. But what I did was the night before the exam, what I would do is my final review. Now I've already done all the other stuff. I've already been studying for it for 4 or 5 days. What I do is I would put the book down on a desk or a table, and I would just look at, just glance at it and see what the topic was. And then I would walk around the room and pretend that I was teaching it to someone. And I would come back and then I would look at the book again and I would just glance at it quick and say, okay, did I forget something? Or did I get something wrong? And if I did, I would go around the room and teach it again. And if I didn't, I would move on to the next topic. So, you know, just the point though is that however, whatever method you use, if you can teach something to someone, that is absolutely positively the best way to learn it. So even if you're just pretend teaching, you know, just in your, sometimes you can walk around and speak out loud, you can do it in your head, whatever. But if you pretend that you're teaching it to someone, that is absolutely the best way to learn it. And if you get somebody to sit there and actually teach it to them, even better. Maybe the family dog. All right, that's enough about studying. If anybody has any questions, kind of just, you know, shout them out or type them too. So feel free to interrupt. All right, so you've done your proper studying. And again, if you're well prepared, if you study and you're well prepared, you're going to be more relaxed on the exam day. And if you're more relaxed, you're going to do better. Okay, because your brain's not going to freeze up as well. You know, you're not going to be rushing as much, etc. All right, so how do we turn the situation on the left there where, you know, someone dreads exam day? How do we turn it into maybe not a joyful day that you can't, you know, wait for it, but at least a day that's less stressful? Well, again, we're going to talk now about these characteristics that the high scoring test takers have, and how can you achieve those, you know, characteristics. All right. So these are things, again, this is all, I'm not making any of this up. This is all stuff from studies that the good test takers tend to do just instinctively without even thinking about it. Okay. One is plan your time. Okay. So let's say, for example, it's a 1 hour exam, 60 minutes, and you have 40 questions. Okay. So you figure, okay, I have 1.5 minutes per question. Well, you don't really have 1.5 minutes per question because, you know, you need a little time to settle in, and then you want to leave some time at the end to review. So if you want to be really aggressive, you could say, okay, 1 minute per question. That'll leave it 20 minutes at the end, or maybe 1.5 minutes per question, leave it 10 minutes at the end. So somewhere probably in that, like 1.25 minutes per question, something like that. So somewhere in that range. Now, it doesn't have to be exact, but what you want to do is, let's say after 20 questions, you're halfway through, right? When you're at the, say, 20-minute mark in the exam, it's a 1 hour exam, at the 20-minute mark, just take a look. And if you're on question, out of 40 questions, if you're on question like 17 or 18, you're doing okay. If you're on question 20 halfway through, even better. But if you're on question 17 or so, that's good. If you're on question 10 or 11, you're in trouble. Okay, you got to speed up. So just the point being, just calculate out, you know, your time, the time you need, leave some time at the end, and then just check periodically to see if you do need to speed up or not. Now, the next one here, read every word of a question and every possible answer. Extremely important. Now, I can tell when I'm speaking to a live audience, I can tell from the looks on some people's faces that they're thinking, why is he telling me this? This is so simple. It's so obvious. I'm not going to make a stupid mistake like that, like not reading every word of a question. Well, guess what? Whenever you see a sign that tells you not to do something that's incredibly stupid, and you're thinking, who would ever do that? Well, the reason the sign is there is because somebody did it, okay? Well, even good test takers, and I'm a good test taker, and I have occasionally made the mistake of not reading every word of a question or every word of an answer. You know, you're in a rush, whatever, you're a little nervous. So it is a mistake that people make all the time. And I can guarantee, you know, that probably every one of you has made it at one time or another. All right. one of the reasons for reading every single word carefully is you never want to miss key words or key phrases, okay? So a word like always or never or except, I mean, there's the whole meaning of the question right there, okay? And words like never and except completely change the entire meaning of the question. They kind of make it the opposite of what it would otherwise be. You know, and also or a phrase like most important or most likely. Now, if you have a question that says most likely or most important, all four of the possible answers can be correct, okay? But you're looking for the one that is the most important of those four correct answers. So, you know, or the one that occurs most frequently or something like that. So it's very important to read every word. And in fact, what I would often do, I'm a fast reader. So if you're not a fast reader, you may not be able to do this. But what I would do is read the question, look at the answer, decide which one it was. And I would go back and very quickly read the question again, just to make sure I didn't miss a keyword like never or something like that. But in any case, just be careful as you're going through. The other thing is one of the answers might be all of the above. So the point here being, let's say you're in a rush, okay? You're getting a little behind, so you're in a rush, you're kind of nervous. You read a question, you see the first answer, A, and you say, I know that's correct. I read it last night, I studied it, I absolutely positively know this is correct. Well, if you so you mark it and you move on to the next question. Well, if you had read B, you would see B is also correct. And C is also correct because the answer is all of the above, but you missed seeing that because you didn't read all the way down. And that can also happen too. If you miss a keyword like except, you say the first answer, you see, oh, that's correct, so I'm going to mark that and move on. But actually, you were looking for the wrong answer because the word, you know, because it was except. So, anyways, just be careful of that. The other thing here is answer the easier questions first, okay? Someone who's a good test taker does not get bogged down with a tough question. You get to a question, you say, oh, I have no clue, or, oh, I think I can figure this out, but it's going to take me a while. Don't get bogged down on it. And I know this was originally written for paper exams, and I know things are a little different now with the, you know, computerized exams. It's not as easy to scan around and all that, but I know there's typically is some way that you can flag a question to come back to. So one of the things you could do is you could either just take a wild guess and then, but flag it to come back to, or, you know, if you're able to, or just leave it blank and, you know, and come back to it later. Was that question or something? No, okay.
Oh, no.
So, okay, anyway, so the point is don't get bogged down on the tough questions. Answer the easier questions first, and, you know, at the end, if you've got 3 or 4 questions that were a little tough, you know, flag them and go back to them at the end. And we'll talk again, we'll mention that again in a little while. Another one here, okay, there are no trick questions. One of the mistakes that poor test takers make, or low scoring test takers make, is they look for trick questions. And, you know, certainly on standardized exams or on any, you know, especially I think, you know, when you reach college, there just are no trick questions. Whatever it says, that's what it means. Don't read the question and say, well, it's saying this, but I wonder if it really means this, if there's some little trick. No, it is what it is. Just accept it at face value, and you're going to do much better. The other thing is eliminate distractors. So sometimes you have a question. I don't think there's a lot of these, but I've certainly seen questions like this, where you have this very long question with several sentences. And, you know, the example I might use again for the funeral students is something like, you know, a woman comes in, she wants to talk to you about having a service for her husband, you know, who was a veteran and blah, blah, blah. And then at the end, there's a sentence at the end. Well, the entire question is really the last sentence. There were 3 sentences before it that had really nothing to do with it. It's just like kind of background information. So what you want to do when you look at one of these long questions is say, okay, what is this really asking? You know, and sometimes it's really just that one sentence or partial sentence at the end. So just eliminate the unrelated information. All right. Another thing is look for hints from other questions, because sometimes a different question, and we'll have an example of that, will give you the answer or at least give you a hint as to the answer to to a different question. And then at the end, I know again, this is something you might not be able to do as easily or at all, perhaps on a computerized exam as on a paper exam. But if you're able to go back and recheck your answers, fine. But it's really more to just make sure you didn't that you didn't leave any of them blank. Because you should never ever change your answer on a hunch. Okay, huge mistake that people make. You're much more likely to change a correct answer to an incorrect answer, or an incorrect answer to another incorrect answer, than you are to actually get the correct answer when you go back and change your mind, unless you know for sure. Like I said, you found the answer in a different question, so say, oh, I got that other one wrong because here's the answer here. You can go back and change it. But if it's just a gut feeling, don't go with it. Your first impression was more likely correct. And then guess if you don't know. Never leave a question blank. Okay, you don't get penalized for wrong answers. I actually did take an exam once a long time ago where you got penalized for wrong answers, but they'll tell you that, and that's the only time that I've ever seen that. So don't leave a question blank. If you leave a question blank, you're going to get a 0 on it. Even if you just guess a wild guess, you have usually a 25% chance of getting it correct. And with these techniques we're going to show you in a minute, hopefully it's going to be a 50% chance or better of getting it correctly. You're going to be able to narrow it down. So instead of a wild guess, you're going to narrow it down to hopefully 2 or 3 possibilities. All right. So now we're going to talk about some examples. So I think the most important thing is really what we were just talking about, those techniques, or those, I should say, characteristics perhaps, those characteristics of the high scoring test takers. If you can adopt those characteristics, like don't look for the trick question, make sure you read every word of the question and answers, look for keywords, etc. If you can do that, that's the biggest thing right here in terms of scoring better on the exams. But there are also some techniques here that you can use where if you don't know the answer, you may know a little bit about it, but you're not really sure, or maybe you don't know, you just say, I don't even remember seeing that, where you can improve your chances of getting it correct. There's no guarantee, but if you can improve your chances, or even if your guess, like I said, if you're guessing between 2 answers rather than guessing between 4, you're certainly improving your chances. All right, so let's talk about some examples here. And one of them is this question and answer association, Q&A association. Look for some similarities, okay? Synonyms or words and phrases that, that look or sound alike, or prefixes and suffixes that relate to the question. So basically you're looking for something in the question that gives you a hint as to which of the answers might be correct. And sometimes it can be very difficult to phrase a question in a way that doesn't at least partially give away the answer. So here's one example, and yes, this is medical. Not all my questions are medical. Some of them are actually funeral related or history. But the point here, though, is that even if you know nothing, you have no healthcare background whatsoever, and you know nothing about this, you should be able to figure this answer out. Okay. So intubation is when we put a tube in someone's airway to put them on a ventilator, right? Okay. And there are a number of different ways to do this. And one of the ways of doing it is called nasopharyngeal intubation. It's just one technique. And it wants to know, what is that? Okay. Well, look here. Nasopharyngeal. Okay. Naso is basically the same word as nasal, the nose. Right? It's basically putting a tube through the nose. So even if you know absolutely nothing about this, just looking at it, right? Oral means the mouth, but if you're just looking at it, you say naso and nasal, those sound very familiar, or very, very similar. Let me go with that. So even if it's a guess, you just, you have a pretty good chance of getting it right when you see something like that. Again, no guarantee, but if you don't know anything else about it, go with something like that, and you might get it right. All right, here's another example. I took this one from the funeral course, actually. During their second year, they learn about diseases, and this is one of the things, this is one of the questions on their board preparation course. All right, so the point here is that they want to know what an inflammation of the muscular wall of the uterus. And again, this is where you're looking for keywords. So inflammation and muscular would really be key words here. Okay, so what is it? Well, if you were a funeral student, or a nursing student or whatever, you would know that itis means inflammation. You put itis at the end of any word and it means inflammation. So we've already narrowed it down to two. It has to be A or B because of the itis, right? And then myo means muscle. So of those two, myo, muscle, itis, inflammation, it's got to be A. Okay, so even if you've never heard of the word, you would be able to figure it out. Actually, medical terminology, once you learn the basics, is not all that difficult. All right, any questions so far? Again, just yell them out if there are any. All right. Another one. Okay, this is one where, again, a question may give you the answer to a different question. Now, I realize, too, that one of the problems I do know with computerized exams as compared to a paper exam is that it's more difficult to go back to a question if you didn't flag it. So, that could be a little issue here. Hopefully the question that gives you the answer will be in front of the other question. But anyhow, this does occur. This type of thing does occur. So anyways, question 16, who served as the Supreme Allied Commander in Europe during World War II? Okay, now you're not a history buff, but you've kind of heard of these guys. I say, I don't know, MacArthur. I've heard of MacArthur. He was a big shot in World War II, so I'm going to put down MacArthur. Okay. Well, then a few questions later, you come across this one. It says, as Supreme Allied Commander in Europe during World War II, General Eisenhower. Okay, that just gave you the answer to the other question. So if you have a way of going back and changing it, that would be one of the very few legitimate reasons for going back and changing an answer. Okay, so by the way, so it doesn't give you the answer to this one though. Anyone want to tell me what General Eisenhower oversaw the planning of in Europe? Which one of those? Which is the correct answer of those? Any takers? No takers? Okay, this is ancient history for you guys. For me, I was born not too long after all this happened. Okay, D-Day, right? He oversaw D-Day in which was in Europe. The other two, Doolittle Raid and Midway, were in the Pacific, and Operation Barbarossa was Hitler's invasion of Russia, which did not work out too well for him. All righty, moving on. Okay, so with all of the above questions, okay, try to find two possible answers that are definitely correct, because if two of the three are correct, it has to be all of the above, right? So like here's another example. All right, which of the following muscles are found in the thigh? Now, most people, especially if you've pulled one running or whatever, most people know that the quadriceps and the hamstrings are down in the thigh, right? So you've never heard of the vastus lateralis, small muscle, but if A and C are correct, the answer has to be all of the above, even if you never heard of the third alternative. Okay, so look for that. Unfortunately, with the none of the above questions, and there's not that many none of the above questions out there, but if you get a none of the above, there's no shortcut. You just have to know that all three of the others are incorrect. That's where the studying comes in. All righty. Deceptive computation. Okay, I'll give you a warning. Here's a math question. Math question coming up. The point here being that they're not going to be as complicated as you think when you first look at them. The other thing is if it's something that requires some calculation and you're not allowed to use a calculator, the math is not going to be really all that difficult. Maybe if you're a math major, but otherwise it's going to be usually simpler than you think. All right, so here it wants to know what's the area of a circle with a 90-degree quadrant of 15 square inches. Okay, so it's basically saying 15 square inches for each 1/4 of the circle, correct? That's the way to look at it. So here it's pretty simple. So it might, when you first read the question, you say, "Oh my God, I'm not that great in math. This is really complicated." It's really not. It's basically just saying if a circle has 4 sections in it that are 15 square inches each, well, you just multiply 15 times 4 and it's 60. So it's not as complicated as, sometimes your brain can freeze when you see something like that, especially if you're not, really great in math. And honestly, I was looking, actually, this was one, when I first did the research, this was a question that they had. And I was wondering, I was thinking, maybe I can come up with a better question. Well, I went online and it was mostly stuff for math majors and I didn't find anything I really liked. But I did come up with this. Now, does anyone want to tell me what number parking space that car is in? Anybody come up with it? The last class I did, somebody came up with it. Any idea? No? Any takers? All right. How about now? All right. So the reason I liked this is that it points out, and this is a good lesson for life in general, but it's also pertinent to taking exams and trying to figure out a question, is that sometimes you just have to look at something from a different perspective, and then it, like, let's say you want to look into a room to see if somebody is in there. Well, if you look through the doorway from a certain angle, you say, oh, the room is empty. But you step over here and you look into the room from the other angle and say, oh, there's the person I was looking for. So, whether it's turning something upside down or whatever, if you just look at something from a different perspective, a lot of times that will give you the answer. And now it's obvious, whereas before it looked like you wouldn't be able to find it. So, all righty. Complex questions. Okay, I always used to hate these questions, the ones where they give you something and then there's like a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you have to do something with those. They're actually not all that hard. I used to groan when I saw them, but really shouldn't have, because most of them are not all that difficult. There's different things that they'll do. Sometimes they ask you to say what's the first and last option, or I'm sorry, sometimes they ask you to put them in order. They might ask you something else. But a common one is to say, okay, put these in order from 1 through 5. All right, well, one of the ways to do this, and again, here's another medical question, but you can figure this out even if you've never been in a trauma room. You can figure this out. So basically, a trauma victim comes in. Here's 5 steps. What order do we do them in? What's first, what's second, and so far so forth. Okay. Well, the first thing to do is figure out what's first and second. I'm first and last. Okay. Well, it's asking what should you do in the emergency department. Okay. Well, 3, send the patient to the operating room. Once you send them to the operating room, you're done. Nothing else gets done in the emergency department except the paperwork, but nothing else gets done. Okay. So that has to be the last one. Now, if you look down below, there's only 2 of them, A and D, where 3 is the last one. So it has to be either A or D. Okay, the others you've already eliminated. So now, even if you take a wild guess, you just went from a 25% chance to a 50% chance of getting it right. Okay, well, anyways, the other one is, how about gown and glove? All these things are very important, obviously, but if you don't put on a gown and glove at the beginning, you're going to have blood and who knows what else all over you. So if you don't put it on for the start, you might as well not even bother. So gown and glove kind of has to be the first one. So you don't even need to know the order of the middle 3. Just by knowing what comes first and what comes last, you just figured out that the answer has to be D. Okay, so sometimes this is just, kind of like deductive reasoning, a little logic will often help you get to the answer, even if you don't otherwise know anything about it. All right, similar choices. Again, if you have 3 answers that are all very similar or basically the same thing, and one that's different, the one that's different is generally going to be the correct answer, right? So in funeral services, a family comes in with everything, that you need. They come in with the, the death certificate, an obituary, a check to pay for it. They bring in the clothes. They bring in whatever you need. Does that make your job more complex, difficult, intricate? Those all mean the same thing, all kind of negative, or pleasant. Well, obviously it makes your job more pleasant, but the point here being that's the one that's different from the other. The others are almost different ways of saying the same thing. So the answer is going to be C. All right. And then getting to the end here, judgment questions. This probably doesn't come up too often, but every once in a while it does. And some of this applies to, essay exams, where you might be asked, something about, kind of an opinion type of question. Well, as I tell the funeral students, I think this is illustrative. Let's say that most funeral parlors, they have a certain way of going about the ceremony, the visitation, the ceremony, or whatever. But you think differently. There's a handful, maybe 5% or 10% that do things a different way, and you like this different way of doing things, and you think that's much the better way of doing things, and that's fine. But on the exam, you know that the answer they're looking for is the standard way, the way you don't like, but that's the answer that they're looking for. Well, you like the other way, make your point in class, etc. But on the exam, give them the answer they're looking for, even if you disagree with it. Give them the answer they're looking for, because you're only hurting yourself. You're not making your point. You're not doing anything except hurting yourself if you don't give them the answer that they're looking for, and then make your stance somewhere else. All right. And then just just briefly to mention essay exams and reports. A lot of the same, some of the same principles apply. Obviously, an essay is a little different than multiple choice. The number one way that people get things wrong on an essay exam, you can write a beautiful answer. If you didn't answer the question that was asked, you're going to get it wrong. Okay. And so now politicians, we didn't have that up there. Politicians are trained, and I actually took a media training course once because I used to have to sometimes do interviews and things. And they actually train you that if the interviewer asks a question that isn't really a question that you like or not really what you want to talk about, you can maybe just kind of allude to it, but then go give them, talk about what you want to talk about, right? And you see politicians do this all the time. They don't answer the question that was asked. Well, that's how you're going to flunk an essay exam. And also, let's say the essay exam asks you about three things. They'll say, okay, list these three things, talk about these three things. If you talk about two of them and you write a fantastic answer, but you didn't hit the third one, again, that's where you're going to fail that answer. All right, enough of that. We are actually getting toward the end here. Almost done. So we did plan ahead. We now have 10 minutes. We've answered all the questions, except for the ones that we flagged to go back to. And we have 10 minutes or maybe 15 minutes left. So this is the time where you're now going to go back to those hard questions, the ones that you flagged, okay? And they are often easier at this point. I mean, have you ever had the experience where you're, trying to think of something, could be like somebody's name or something else? I know I like to play a word game on my phone, and sometimes there's a word, I just can't get the word. And I just, shut it off. I go back to it 20 minutes later and the word just like pops off right at me. It's like, oh, so that was so simple. How did I not get that before? Well, same thing. You're more relaxed now. You're almost done. You've been exposed to the other questions. Maybe there was a hint in one of the other questions. You might not have even realized it at the time. And also your subconscious has been working on it. It's like when you can't remember somebody's name and then 5 minutes later it just pops into your head. The little gremlins in the back of your brain were kind of working on it while you were thinking of other things. So this is the time. Go back to those tough questions. Again, you may not be able to do this on a computerized exam. There may be some way of just making sure you didn't answer, that you answered every question, but you probably can't go back and review them all. But that's okay, because again, you never want to change your answer unless you are absolutely positively correct that you got it wrong the first time. Because again, you found the answer, or you just realized you misread the question, or you just somehow something popped into your head. Oh, wait a minute, I remember that now. But otherwise, leave it alone. All right, and just at the very end here, I just want to mention something that I think is very important, and that is to always aim high, okay? Let's say passing is 70, right? And you say, all I really need to do is get a 70, because all I really need to do is pass. Well, that's fine, but if you're studying to get a 70, and maybe you'll get a 70 or 74, but you also might get a 65, right? If you're having a bad day or anything goes wrong. So you really don't want to, you really want to aim higher. And now, I mean, if you're ambitious, you're going to aim to ace every exam. But maybe if you feel that's unrealistic or whatever, then at least if passing is a 70, aim to get an 80 or aim to get an 85. And then even if you fall short, which you probably will, because I always certainly fell short of whatever my goals were, even if you fall short, be happy, because it's going to be higher than where you would have ended up if you had aimed lower, right? Aim for a 70, you know, if you're lucky, if you get the 70, you aim for an 85, you get an 80 or a 78. Hey, that's still a lot higher than you would have gotten if you had aimed just to get the 70. Alrighty, and probably a good lesson for life in general, I think. And alrighty, and this is, well, Ranger, you see Ranger wandering around somewhere here. Okay, Ranger would like to know if you have any questions. Alrighty, if no questions, hopefully that was helpful, and I wish you all the best of luck. Alrighty.
All right.
How's that? Alrighty, I'm gonna get out then.
Okay.
Alrighty. Okay. Good night.
All right, folks.
Can I
So I'm
ask
gonna
a quick question?
Well, we get to look at
Oh,
the younger version of Ranger.
did you saying something? A question?
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
I don't know a lot about the flagging because I've never done a flag unless I was like absolutely certain that I got it right, even though I may have gotten it wrong. But I was wondering, can you use a flag and then unflag it? So like you're all done with your test, now you can go back to your flagged ones?
Yeah, most of the computerized programs between the the shells at the colleges versus the national board exams or any licensure exam for that matter. You can usually you can flag and unflag things on the top of each question. You just have to be able to go back to that question. So the two challenges would be depends on like if you're talking college courses, some faculty will let you go back and forth. And some faculty like this, raunchy one here that locks his stuff up and prevents you from doing that. So,
Yeah, I know, it's a
you kind of
bummer.
have to move forward, right? And some of us have policies, but with
In the
that,
state board, can you go back?
the board you can. I'll mention that in a second how
Okay.
you can do that, but it's a challenge. So, but the reason I do that, for my classes, because I'm trying to train you to think logically and say, okay, I'm going to put down an answer. But then I always have the loophole of where I say in my class, at least I say, look, if you come down to, he's saying like, I got the answer, then email it to me and say, hey, I got the answer for that question, because I'll go in and change. Because I'm going to tell you right now that most of the time, I can't remember actually the last time that a student emailed me and actually changed a wrong answer to a correct answer. But I can tell you pretty much almost most of the emails I've ever gotten, the student was trying to change the wrong answer to another wrong answer, or they were changing the correct answer to a wrong answer. So I put that in so that all of a sudden, as soon as the quiz ends, I get another email that says, abort, abort, abort. I looked up the answer and I realized I was about to change the right one, abort. And I'm like, yeah, I know, because at least by saying the email, I can ignore the email. I was doing you a favor by ignoring the email. But if you changed it, that was on you. So, I help people out with that. But with most licensure exams, for any major that is, because I know we have a blended audience here. So most licensure exams, what they work is they're all computerized testing centers now. You schedule the computerized testing center, you go in, you got the woman with a chain around her neck with the glasses down like this that, scans your fingerprints and, make sure it's you. And then she's looking through a little window watching you take your exam, and you got cameras on you, and, you can hear your heartbeat. That's how quiet these places are. And they can get pretty stressful. And that's the thing is when you're taking these exams, you're under a very stressful environment where, again, you can hear your own heartbeat. They'll give you your earplugs, whatever you need. But when you go through the quiz, yes, you do have the ability to flag things. And most of these testing centers, they do have the flagging ability. Now, the only challenge that you come with is going back is you have to make it all the way to the end. Because if you're on 108 and you wanted to go back to 8, the only buttons on the bottom are next or previous. So you'd have to click 100 times this way and 100 ways this way. So you'd have to do is you have to make sure you get all the way to the end. And then once you get to the end, it's easier to go back.
Yeah.
So what I usually recommend is flag it. That helps. But then there's something else to kind of satisfy your psyche, but also to communicate, because this goes back to what I was talking about highlighting. Don't over highlight, but it's too, I need all these words. You can read the rest of the paragraph, okay? Don't just highlight what you need. Because what I do is when you go into these testing centers, and you can do the same thing if your professor allows you to, you just say, look, this is my system. I'm holding it up to the camera, or if you're in the classroom, they can see what you're doing. And you say, here's my system. So anytime you're like, I didn't know the answer, put an answer down. Because if you, let's say there's 4 options and you don't put an answer down, then it's automatically wrong if you run out of time, right? But if you put an answer down, at least you have a 25% chance that you guessed it correctly. And we're hoping that you put down, you obviously narrowed it down. Maybe it was a 50-50 chance because you're looking going, it's one of these two. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Let's hope, you use your gut feeling and you went with probably the right one, but at least have a 50% chance because you got rid of two that were obviously wrong. So you put those down. So you check it off. Now what you do is, yes, you can flag it. But what I do is when you go in, when you do it in class, you can get paper. When you go to these testing centers, what they'll do is they'll give you a laminated piece of graph paper or a laminated piece of paper. It's this tiny little piece of paper. You can do your math equations on it for your exams. You can do all of that. What I do is on the top of the page, I write, question 1. I guessed at this one. I didn't know for sure and I guessed. So I write the number 1. Now, if I made my best gut feeling, I just write the number 1. But if there's one where I'm like, I honestly have not a clue what the answer was on this one, question number 8, and then I circle it. So now when you get to the very end, what you're presented with, because again, it's previous and next up until this point, you get to the very end, you're now given a grid. Okay, it looks like a spreadsheet. Okay, you look at this grid which just says numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, going all the way through like 300 questions. And then so you have like 300 numbers. That's all you have is the numbers, and it will tell you if it was flagged. So now what you do is you get, sometimes it says a flag, depends, sometimes it doesn't, depends on the testing center, but should show you flagged. But what I do is now I may over flag things. It's like just like highlighting. If I flag everything that I think is thing, do I know which one it was that I have to know the exact number of the one that I wanted to go back and fix. If I flagged about 20 things, I got 20 things to look at. So by now looking at my paper, I now know that I circled it. I know that this one was to assess my psyche, but if I need to go back and I got the right answer, I know that it was one of these 20 things I wrote numbers for. But if I know for certain that I guessed, I know correct. If it was one that I was like, this is the one that's hard, I circled those and I restrictively only circled the ones I absolutely had to circle on my little piece of paper, my laminated piece of paper. So now that may narrow it down to 5. I had 20 numbers that I know that these are the 20 numbers that I was also flagging, but these are the 5 numbers that I know if I come back with an answer later, I only have 5 that I have to look back at, and that's going to help me find that answer quicker because I still have a timer going up in the corner of the screen. And if I run out of time, trying to look at 20 of them, that I flagged, I'm not doing too well. So if I can narrow that down, it helps. Or maybe you can write, 1 Buddhist, 2, casket, 3, artery, so that I know that was the artery question. That was the Buddhist question. That was the, so sometimes you can do that really quick. So those definitely help.
So you can go, so pretty much you could just flag stuff you I'm not sure, maybe I could go back to that, or you can't think of it, so you can just put a flag, and then when you're all done and you got all the ones still put something, but just go back to that one where you were I think I know it but I can't remember, and then you can just go back and be oh yeah, it's this one.
Absolutely. And that also helps too for everyone, if you're doing a quiz on the computer, or even if you're doing it on paper, again, I still give out paper quizzes and exams, putting a little asterisk next to it, or, if you're on a computerized one and the system allows you to flag things, don't over flag things. That kind of defeats the point, just like highlighting.
Yeah.
But if you flag something, even just in your own classroom, sometimes it's easier to tell your professor, I don't remember what number it was because I finished the exam and I wasn't allowed to look back. There's usually, again, we put blocks on those sometimes to prevent you from copying the questions and giving them to other students and things like that. So we do try to keep the integrity of our exams. But you can say, I don't remember the number was, but I know there was a question about this. Well, now I got 100 questions to look through on your final. Oh, geez. But if you tell me that you flagged it, you maybe flagged 5 of them, I can find that question a lot quicker. You don't remember the number, but I can find it quicker because you say, professor, go back and find the flagged one. That makes it a lot easier. So sometimes that also helps in the classroom. And, if you have a question, the professor you don't want the professor to explain to you after you've done the quiz. Always reach out to your professor in the middle of quizzes too. Don't be afraid to, bring up those topics and say hey, I have a question. Bring it to the podium. I always miss the days where you can just come to the podium and ask questions. We do have a lot more electronic exams people are taking from home today. So that does take away your access to the professor standing in front of the room where you could come up and say, I don't understand number 67. Because when those days were there, I would turn around and say, hey guys, when you get to 67, you know, everyone pause. When you get to 67, this is going to be the, you know, the explanation. When it asks this, it's referencing this. Oh, okay. And you see the sigh over the room. They all go back to 67 that they answered, you know, or they, when they get there, they now know what the explanation was. You know, so I don't have 20 students coming up and asking the same question, or some of them don't realize there was an issue. You know, and again, the student that usually asked the question is the one that understood that there was something wrong with the question. Not that there was something wrong with the question, but they understood what they were asking. The student that just takes for granted that the, you know, oh, well, I don't know, maybe it's one of these, and they just take it for granted because they didn't know the knowledge in the first place to realize that maybe the question wasn't as clear as they thought. They just figured because they didn't know the knowledge that the, you know, that it must be one of these, and they're afraid to ask. So, you know, those days were there. But any other questions before I move on?
I love technology.
you.
In some ways, the
Thank
paper
you.
exam is better.
Yes, I love paper.
Yeah.
Oh, good luck tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so I'm going to cover our next topic is studying. So cover briefly again, relaxing, all these things, and you know, before we even get into you know this mastering of studying, pieces of this are you know your energy levels and things. I mean, I'm going to talk about energy. This is what this chart is. This is energy levels based off of different types of studying, but your energy also has to do with what you eat, how much sleep you have, things like that. These are valuable things. What else are you doing? Stress in your life, things like that all play a role in this. You know, having a quiet place to study, having a place where you don't have distractions. You know, going to a place like a library or something like that is beneficial because that is going to give you that area away where you can just say, you know, distraction free. I have students that they said, do I really have to? To the lab. Yes. So, you know, do I really have to turn my camera on for Zoom for class? You know, yeah. I mean, right now I don't require it for you guys, but you know, in the classroom, yeah, because I need to know when that you're attending. And they say, well, I take my class from the bathroom. Not that they're going to the bathroom, but they take their class from the bathroom. They turn backwards on the toilet. They put their laptop on the back of the toilet bowl. I said, oh, why? I said, that sounds an interesting thing. I would love to know why. And they said, that's the only place I can get peace and quiet from the family. Because if I'm in the bathroom, the kids won't bother me. I can tell the kids, mom's in the bathroom, don't disturb me. So, but if I'm in class, they're tugging at my shirt tails, and they're saying, they want my attention. So, we do what we need to do. But, libraries, bathroom, I guess, whatever you need to do, find a quiet place. But one of the best things is the place that you study should mimic the place that you're going to take that exam. So if you're going to a testing center, there's nothing better than going to a library because they have those cubicles where you sit at the table and you have the blinders. Find the library that has those. Because guess what? These testing centers have a computer on those type of setups where you're using their desktop, but you have the blinder so you can't see the other people, right? That mimics a testing center. A library is quiet. That's going to mimic the testing center environment that you're in. If you're going to come and sit in my class and you're going to take a quiz, guess what? Come to the classroom. Study in the classroom. You can study at home, you can study wherever you go, but the best place to do is find time between classes to study in the classroom. Right? Find that way to do that. Or, stand in your environment. I'm going to talk about different types of study methods. But if I stand here and maybe I'm a front row seater, right? They do have a thing about where people sit in the classroom depending on their type, what type of student they are. And, so I'm a front row seat kind of student. And I'm sitting there, and what am I going to do? I'm going to stand there, but I'm going to talk to myself. I'm going to find a quiet room. I'm shutting these doors, and I'm going to talk to myself, and I'm going to explain to myself. Right now, what I'm doing is I'm talking to a screen. Okay, I'm talking to a 75-inch massive computer television screen. That's what you guys are on right now. So obviously I have the ability to talk to myself. Okay, if you figure that out. Okay. Yes, if there's people in the room, I could walk around and I would talk and I would interact with everybody. If half of you were here, I'd be talking to two groups at once. That's how I teach normally, right? I teach to two groups at once. I don't face one direction. So I can stand here and I could walk this room. Now, walking this room, and I can explain to myself and give myself a lecture about, I'm going to go back to my previous notes that I was doing, about the appendicular skeleton, right? So I'm talking about the appendicular skeleton, and I'm going to talk about the pelvic girdle, and I'm going to talk about all these things. And as I pace this room and I explain this to myself, and I give myself a lecture, guess what? I was doing that lecture to myself in the very room that I'm going to take that exam. Which means that when I take that exam, I'm doing it in the environment in which I am going to remember it the best because of the lighting, because of the sound, because of everything. That also goes to what you do. How many of you eat while you study? How many of you eat while you study, or you chew gum while you're studying? Okay. How many of you have something type of beverage, tea, coffee, something while you're studying? Right? So what you're doing while you study does mimic your ability to retain knowledge. If you chew gum while you study, but you can't chew gum while you're taking your exam, that's going to hurt. If you listen to music while you study, but you can't listen to music while you take your exam, that's going to hurt because it's the environment. Right now, I got the football players weightlifting in the gym down the hall. Okay, they get very noisy. But if that's the environment that you're studying during, and that's what you're used to, then that's going to be the same environment when you take the exam. Then that's the noise that I want to hear. Not Jimmy Buffett. Okay? He may be a great artist, but I'm not listening to Jimmy Buffett when I take the exam. Then I'm not going to retain the knowledge nearly as much as if I was listening to the same environment. Or chewing gum or whatever. So you have to keep that in mind when you're studying. But, do you have the energy? And that's what I'm about to talk. Do you have the energy in order to retain that knowledge? Do you have the energy to continue the entire time you study? Do you have the energy to continue the entire time you take that exam? How many of you love coffee? Coffee is your vice. How many of you your oops. How many of you your vice is, there we go. How many of you your vice is coffee? Yeah. Okay, coffee, cigarettes, whatever the case may be. So now we have to consider that if we're drinking caffeine, or if you're a smoker, or anything like that, maybe you're just you love food, or you like something, then what's going to happen is if you get, or you sugar, right? Your breakfast is a donut, lots of sugar. So what's going to do is that gives you big spikes in energy. And when you get that big spike in energy, are you going to last? Now, you may be able to keep that going because you're constantly drinking coffee while you study. Right? You go to the library across the street here, and the library has a Starbucks on the lower, I call it the first floor, but it's really the basement. So you have the floor you enter. There's a Starbucks. So you can go to the library and get your coffee. It's great. But now you're halfway through the exam, especially when you do like a licensure exam. Ugh, right? You're in that room. You can't leave. Right? That's not a quick final exam. That's not a quick quiz. And you're not allowed anything in that room. So all of a sudden you crash mid-exam. Just absolutely crash mid-exam. And you don't have the energy to continue. So what you do is I always recommend, like, normal studying, normal quizzes, your final exam, not gonna, it's not gonna be as much. But when if any of you are going for a licensure exam where you have to sit through something for a long period of time, like 3 hours, you don't want to crash. What I always say is, while you're preparing for that, start laying off, try to lower your, cigarette usage, try, switch over to patches. You can wear a patch in there, but, get used to, having a nicotine patch. Start laying off the coffee and other caffeine things, lay off the donuts, lay off all these things that give you energy, short-term energy, and try to start getting that so you don't have a withdrawal in the middle of the exam. Those are key things, okay? But now we get into studying, right? So I broke out a 8-hour day. This is 8 hours, okay? That's a typical work day. We can call that a typical study day too. So over the course of 8 hours, the first one is binge studying. How many of you binge study? You're like, I'm going to open this book, I'm going to study, and I'm going to make a day of it, right? It's the day before the exam, and I'm just going to study. I have nothing else. Clear my schedule. I am going to study. That's my study day. How many of you would do that? How many of you just binge study? You just look and you say, yep, this is my day, right? Okay. So this is your energy levels. So what happens is you started off way up here, and then all of a sudden you're crashing and crashing. Oh, we got a jolt. Oh, I got some coffee. I got some energy. Or, I gotta, obviously you have to go to the bathroom at some point. So, you got up, you moved, and you came back, right? And, all of a sudden we just get a second wind, right? And you get that. Oh, hold on, I get a second wind. And you keep doing this. But at the end of the day, your energy is going down, right? Are you really retaining the stuff at hour 3 that you were retaining at hour 1? Probably not, right? You think you are, but you're not retaining as much as you thought you did. You maybe got the first knowledge, but you didn't get the end knowledge. And the other thing we have to worry about is short-term memory as well. So now if you go for a degree, you have year, 2 years, 4 years, whatever, that you're learning knowledge. So over the course of that, you're building up that knowledge. And if we take a class and all of a sudden we close the book and we move on to the next class, right? We went from Anatomy 1 to Anatomy 2. We went from, managerial accounting to financial accounting or whatever direction those move in. So as you move along, are these concepts still relevant? Absolutely still relevant, right? So what happens is you can't just put the textbook away. We need to build upon that. You need to understand what you're doing before you move on. And yes, we all take classes that we didn't want to take that may mean nothing to our lives, but we had to take them to get our degree. But there's most of your classes, they were put there for a reason, right? I don't want this math class. Oh, this is horrible. But guess what? That math class, you may have said, well, I don't need this management, because all this professor ever talked about, he was talking about, widgets and companies and this much math, but it didn't apply to what I'm doing. I'm an embalmer. That doesn't apply to what I'm doing. He's talking about, something else. Yeah, but you know what? The math applied. You were learning math. And then when you come to me and I'm teaching you embalming math, or we're teaching restored percentages and all of that in restorative art, or we're teaching you accounting, or we're teaching all the math applied. Because you needed those fundamentals to do that, but you never got the fundamentals because you're like, that's boring. I don't want to learn that. So what's going to happen is you also need long-term memory. So what you need to do is when you go to take an exam, the key thing is we don't want to ruin our long-term memory with short-term memory. So now we've been learning, you've been taking lectures, you've been studying all this time. Now all of a sudden you got this major exam, your final exam, and you're studying that day before. And then you study that morning. Well, guess what? Because you're studying in such a large block, you think you're like, I got this, I remember all of it. But what happens is all of a sudden you're at a block, what you're doing is you're burning yourself out to the point that you're getting rid of your ability to go to the long-term memory, the things that you learned over a period of time. You can't study 15 weeks in a day. So what happened, you can try, but it's not going to work. You're going to get key points, okay? There's a reason it takes 15 weeks to take a class. So, but then the worst thing you can do is try to study that morning, because now you study just before the exam. What do you remember? Oh, well, I only studied the things that I couldn't remember before. I'm refreshing my memory on the formula. Okay. And you can do that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, if you're doing that, you remember anything you're doing is replacing something. So if you're using short-term memory, that means that the first thing that your mind is going to go to is the short-term memory. And it's going to make it very hard for you to tap into long-term memory. So what I recommend is just before an exam, before any of this, peace and quiet. Absolute peace and quiet. Okay, if you have major exams that are going to make or break you, and if you can schedule them, if you can schedule an exam, do it first thing in the morning, 8 o'clock. So if I do a licensure exam, I always take the first time slot. I always take the 8 o'clock time slot. Always. If I had a class, I had professors where you would go, where we would have the same professor back to back. And it gets hard, well, obviously, if you have different students in each class, that makes it very hard to do that. But, I would have classes back to back all day long with the same professor. So when I was taking positioning, and then I took exposure. I was in radiology at one point. Same professor, same classroom, same professor. So he knew that 1 week we would do, if we did an exam in this class this week, next week we had an exam in the other class. And he would rotate, he would just switch out the class. It was great because whatever one had the exam was the first class of that day. And I love that. That was a great way to do that. So we got the exam out of the way before we started learning something else and started filling our short-term memory, which made it hard for us to get the long-term. Now, but, peace and quiet. If you take major exams, try to maintain that peace and quiet by, sometimes people will go major exams, like licensure exams, they'll go get a hotel the night before. Get away from their family, wake up. Or if I get up, I just say, all right, nobody bother me. I get up for everyone else. I'm like, no one's allowed, this is the rules of the house. No one's allowed to talk to me, nothing. Get up, I eat my breakfast, peace and quiet. No TV, no radio, no newspaper, nothing. Because every time you read something or every time you listen to something or see something or anything or think about something, I'm not, allowed to listen to anything. Nothing. Okay, clear your mind. I know that's very hard, okay? I have ADD. It's just very hard. Don't clear my mind. But you do. You have to clear your mind. And by clearing your mind and not thinking about anything that morning, nothing at all, not the exam, nothing, okay? I don't even think about the traffic. I just drive. No radio, nothing. And I get to the exam and I still don't think about anything. Because when I go in, my mind is clear, which means that there's no short-term memory use or minimal. I'm not considering anything. I'm not trying to figure anything out. I'm just going in, and then now you're recalling, you're recalling your long-term memory. You're utilizing that. You're pulling from it. Okay. All right. So now, for going on for this, so we have our binge studying. That's what happens there. Then you have long breaks. Long breaks work too. We get things and we get better energy, right? But you're also compartmentalizing your studying, which means you get this and then you come back and you're getting it a little bit and you come back and you get it. But that, like anything else, you ever seen a room? Okay, we're all gonna join the class, come into my classroom, and we have to account for the fact that it's going to take time for everybody to sit down. It's going to take time for everyone to get organized. It's going to take time, right? So let's say I was speaking for 3 hours and it took 15 minutes for everyone to kind of get organized, everyone to sit down, quiet down. You may not realize it, but that burnt into the class time, right? That's 15 minutes. It's the same thing with your studying. So you get settled down, you get your tea. Okay, it's study time, I get tea. You have to get organized. And then it's going to take you a little bit to get into the zone, right? You're studying, but are you really getting it? And then you have to burn. So you see those things are actually going down gradually. It doesn't look like it, but those green bars are slightly, decreasing in time. Then you see the magenta one. That's our short breaks. So we do keep that up, and short breaks actually do give you a little bit, and they do maintain a little higher because what you're doing is you're maintaining your studying, but you're going to get, go to the bathroom. You go get some water. Maybe you cook some dinner. You do something like that. Now, did your studying really stop while you're cooking? No, and that's what I'm about to get to. But what you did was you took moments to move, all right? You didn't just sit down and just focus in one place. You got up, you moved, you got yourself moving. So those short little breaks kind of break up the day, right? But you don't lose focus. But the best thing you can do is integrate, and that's that blue line. So what does integration mean? This means make the studying a part of your day. We said before, the best way to take an exam or study is to be calm, relax. So how do I relax? I relax by integrating. I relax because I'm making studying part of my normal day. I'm not just sitting there reading. I'm not just thinking about studying and stressing myself out. I'm not in the moment. I'm just reading to the point that I lose everything. My father just said, right? He says he takes something and he walks the room. And that's exactly what this is. So how do I integrate? So I integrate into putting things all over my house, right? Or all over my car, all over my life. So instead of just making flashcards and just sitting there with a pile and you're walking around with a pile, I make it a part of my life. I use Post-it notes. I put things on Post-it notes. I'll put things on index cards. I'll put things on my phone. So if I don't have something, I have something, on my phone that I can just, in the doctor's office, like, crap, I don't have anything in my pocket. I didn't bring my flashcards with me. Again, always bring a few with you, but, I have something on my phone that I can review. So I keep things in different places, right? And it's not all the same material. But what I do is I stick those Post-it notes to the door frame of my bedroom. I stick them to the washer. I stick them to the dryer. I stick them to the microwave. I stick them to the dishwasher. I stick them to every part of my life, the dashboard of my car. And what I'm doing is I'm walking through my day. So when I wake up in the morning to walk out of my bedroom to go eat breakfast or take a shower or whatever you're going to do first, I walk out, I take a Post-it note off the door. That Post-it note says, appendicular skeleton. Okay, that's all it says. Okay. I maybe carry that around with me for a few minutes, right? Maybe I stick it to something else. Post-it notes are gonna ruin your woodwork, so stick it to, maybe I go in and I stick it to, I stick it to the door frame in the bathroom. And I think about that for a second, and I said, what's the appendicular skeleton? Well, the appendicular skeleton, I'm not just thinking of the definition. I'm thinking the definition. I'm like, appendicular skeleton is this. And which bones are part of the appendicular skeleton? It's these bones, okay. And then what I do is I go back and I check the back of the Post-it note, that was right? But what I did was I made myself for the next 15 minutes, I only thought about one thing. I wasn't reading a paragraph. I wasn't just thinking about something and go, what was the answer on that? Flip it over, I got it, and I move on to the next one. I was giving myself time to process it. And because I was thinking about it and I was processing it, but I was relaxed. I wasn't just saying, the answer is this. The answer is this, right? It's not a quiz show. I was thinking about it. And by thinking about it, I was committing it to long-term memory. I was making myself understand it because I had to conceptualize it, right? I had to put it into words. I wasn't speaking aloud. I was doing this in my head, but I'm thinking about it. Now, I gave myself some time, and maybe I'm brushing my teeth while I do that. And then before I done brushing my teeth, I take one off of the bathroom mirror, right? And it says, peripheral nerves. Peripheral nerves. Those are, and I stick it, and I do something else, right? And I'm, maybe I'm, whatever, do your hair or whatever you're doing, okay? And you're thinking about that. It's a 15 minutes. So, all right, I got that. I'm committing it to memory. And you're just, again, slowly doing this. So, stick things to anything you possibly can. Now, the other thing is audio, right? So now I'm in the shower. Well, how do I do this? Well, there's a couple different things. One, go get something that holds shoes that's plastic, clear plastic, and hang it on the outside of your shower curtain so it doesn't get wet. And you can put your cards in there. So now while you're taking your shower, all right, I'm going to wash my hair. While I'm washing my hair, I read this card and then I wash my hair. So the entire time it takes me to wash my hair, I'm only thinking about that topic. And I'm thinking about everything about the topic, not just the definition and moving on, but I'm thinking about everything about that topic. And I'm washing my hair. All right, rinse my hair out. Okay, check over. I pick the next card. That's right. And then I cream rinse my hair. All right, as I'm cream rinsing my hair, that's all I'm thinking about. Rinse out the cream rinse. Okay. All right, now I'm going to soap my body. I'm reading another card. Okay, while I'm soaping up my body, that's all I'm thinking about. So it's again, taking things in pieces. You're like, I don't really do. I don't have a clear shower curtain. I can't really see it. That's fine. What about audio recording? So now we can look at this top, it looks like a honeycomb. This is really how your mind is working, right? Your mind needs to read, right? How many of you are a visual learner? How many of you are an auditory learner? And how many of you need to read it? How many of you are which type of learner? Visual? Reading? Okay. Yeah. Good. So believe it or not, you're all everything. But you have more towards something, right? So, Regina needs to see it to understand it. But it doesn't mean that reading is not part of that. It doesn't mean that listening is not part of that, right? Patrick and Liliana, you said that you need to read it, and that's great. But it doesn't mean not seeing it, because when you're reading it, you're also seeing images, right? You're seeing the words. But when you combine all of these things, believe it or not, and they've proven this time and time again, that we all need all of it. We can't just see it. We need to also combine some of these pieces, right? And I was talking about the heart earlier, right? I had my figurative heart in my hand and I was going through the different chambers. Now, what you were really doing is you were listening to what I was saying, but you were also visually seeing what you didn't see it because I didn't have a heart in my hand, but if I had a heart in my hand, you would have seen the heart. And as I was describing that figurative heart in my hands, you were visually seeing what I was pointing at. but you were also hearing it. So when we combine these things, we're powerful. We're powerful studiers because we now combine all of them together. But how do we combine them effectively? When I'm reading the textbook, I'm reading it, but I'm reading it out loud. Find a quiet room and I read my textbook out loud. So I am reading, I am speaking, okay? But I also have my phone. I used to have I still do have it, but you know, a wheel-to-wheel record dictator that I used to have. And then I went to a digital dictator through college. Now with your phone, it's an amazing thing. You just have a recorder on your phone, you can record everything that you're saying. So I have the recorder going, and now I'm reading my textbook. I'm reading the paragraph from my textbook, and I'm recording every word I say. So now I'm saving that for later. Because as I read it, it now becomes available. So I'm reading, I'm speaking, and I'm now getting a recording of that. Because guess what? I'm going to listen. Because now I'm in the shower, and while I put that on the bathroom counter, I'm now playing back recordings of myself reading the textbook. And now I'm listening to it. So now I read it, but maybe there were some things I really didn't get the first time when I read it. So now I could read it quietly while I'm sitting in the living room. Then I find a quiet place. I read it again, but I read it out loud to the recorder. Then when I'm driving, when I'm in the shower, when I'm in the gym and I'm trying to work out, guess what? All of those are times when I can now, I'm doing something else, but I can listen, like through my headphones or whatever. I can listen to what I'm doing, which gives it the same material, but gives me the same material in a different way. So now I'm hearing it, and I'm going to hear things that I didn't see. I'm going to hear things that I read it, but I didn't remember seeing things. So when I hear it again, I'm like, oh yeah, that was right. Okay. But a lot of what we do is recognize, right? So you ever read something, you read a book and you're like, oh, I remember that, and you flip pages. So now I want you to take that same book, right? Read the first page. Read the first chapter. Now I want you to tell me what the next page is. I want you to tell me verbatim what's on page 2. Because if you read page 1 and you can't tell me exactly verbatim what's on page 2, but you flip to page 2 and you tell me, oh yeah, I remember that. It's because you recognized it. You didn't remember it, you recognized it. And when you saw it, you were like, yeah, I remember that because you recognized it and you now know what you saw because you read it before. So by seeing it in different ways, you're going to commit it to memory more. Now, again, under driving, you have a friend. I did this in college, right? I had my radiological physics textbook. Now, the thing with that is it didn't necessarily make sense to everybody else, nor did it have to. But I had a car on campus because I was doing my rotations at the hospital, which allowed me to have a car on campus and when other people could not. So guess what? People needed rides. I needed to study. You're cutting into my study time. So the rule was, here's my textbook. They would read the chapter to me while I drove. That was the rules. Or the better yet, they would ask me questions. So now I'd have my roommate that needed a ride. He would flip to a random page in the textbook, preferably a chapter I'd already read, okay, or a chapter I'd already learned. So he would go and I'd say, all right, I've gone chapter 1 through 20 so far out of 36. He'd go between 1 and 20. So now he would flip to a random page. They would pick a random paragraph and he would read something. And he would say, he would read it and say, okay, which form of radiation can go through concrete? And I would give him the answer. All right, which form of radiation can go through paper? And I would give him the answer. Because he read a paragraph and he turned that sentence into a question. Right? Rather than alpha particles do this, he gave me a question. And now I was hearing it in different ways from different people. Maybe it wasn't the way I would have gotten the question, but he had to form a question. When you're reading things, form questions in your head. When you're reading the textbook, you're also thinking, saying, how could that be asked? Because you're also not just learning it for a quiz, but you're also making your mind think of it in a different way, that you're thinking about that as a question. You're thinking about that a little bit more critically. All right? So when you read things as questions. But in that same way, I'm integrating this into my day. This is a very relaxing day because I'm just daydreaming. I do that anyway. So might as well daydream about my content, right? Rather than saying, I'm studying. Okay, now I'm laundry. Studying. Okay, now I'm cooking. No, I'm thinking about this while I cook. It's relaxing. And I'm retaining it. because I'm only focusing on things in small bits and pieces. I'm going to point out the QR code. I put that there just to make it easier for you to find. But speechifying, right? So I mentioned that under the shower thing, but that goes for driving. That goes for anything. I put Speechify on my phone. It's amazing. So thing with Speechify is that the free version, it's an app on your phone. If you haven't used it, you can go on there, and for the free version, you can pull up websites and it will read it to you. You can have PDFs, whatever, that you can download things. It's all free. It will give you that. If you pay for it, you can get better voices, of course, than the robotic ones that it gives you. But the feature that I really like with the paid version, and this is what I use, is that you can take pictures of books, take pictures of actual pages. So I will pick a random textbook, and in this case, whatever textbook you're actually studying from. But in my case, I have a library within my office up the hill here. And what I'll do is I'll say, hey, I want to remember some of this material. I studied this a long time ago. I don't want to forget this. Or I find a textbook. I'm like, I don't have time. I'm driving all over the place. I'm teaching. I don't have time. At the end of the day, I just want to sit in peace and quiet, to be honest, okay? I don't want to have to read another book. So what I do is I will scan, I would do it, it goes beep, 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 and I can scan 2 pages at a time, and it's converting. It doesn't take that much memory because it takes the pages, it doesn't take the color, it turns it into something that's not legible or readable. And that's how it saves it. But what it's doing is reading the words, and it's only saving those words. Then you hit play, and it will play that textbook. So what I do is, obviously don't do the whole textbook at once. I'll do like a chapter or 2 or 3 chapters, depending on how thin these chapters are, at a time. And then while I'm driving, I'm hitting play on that, and through my dashboard, instead of listening to a podcast that day, I'm listening to my textbook being read to me by my phone. And it does an amazing job. It's really high quality, really good recording. But I didn't have to speak out loud. I didn't have to sit there and read the textbook. It did it for me. It read it. I'm able to listen. It keeps me about my busy day, because we all say, like, how busy my day is, right? You're at work, you're here, you're balancing school, you're doing all these things. And now we have an app that will read that for you. And then you can still read the textbook by listening while you drive. How great is that? All right, so again, that's one app that I do recommend, and there's 2 other apps I'm going to mention on the next slide, but that's one app that I do recommend. It does make your life a little bit, easier. But again, try to do these things, again, reading, taking notes, recording yourself while you read, then listening to that. You're doing things and you're getting things in different ways. But the other thing you can do with recording is ask yourself questions. So as you're going through, I read through the textbook or I read through my notes and I form a question. And I say, what is the bone that does this? Or what is the process that does this? Or in what religion would you do this? Right? And, or I just say, what are the characteristics of this engineering process? Okay? So now I give myself time. I ask that question to the recorder. I give myself plenty of time of blank air on the recording. That way I can answer it, right? Give myself time to say, it was this. And then I record the answer. When I get to the end of that, if I'm using flashcards to read off of when I'm doing this, or if I'm just making up questions as I go, you could do either one. Sometimes I'll ask myself in reverse. Blank is the engineering process, and I need to now know the answer. I need to know what the term was. So, and same thing, giving yourself place. So again, you're utilizing valuable time when you're at the gym, when you're driving, when you're cooking, showering. All of these times that are wasted time of studying are times that you're utilizing, but again, you're more relaxed when you're doing it. And that's the key thing, is being relaxed when you're doing it. All right, these are 2 other apps that I would recommend, but time management, before I mention what's on these apps, time management is key. Right? Time management is basically, you have to reschedule your lives, but you need to schedule yourselves time for everything, right? So what you do is you get up in the morning and you say, oh yeah, I had all these things to do. But then what happens is you start doing one of them, and then that just takes over your time. And you kind of lose track because you're like, I have these concrete things, right? I have a meeting, I have a class to go to, I have all these things. So you keep doing that to the point that your you know, maybe getting distracted by other things like your phone and things. I mean, it's easy to distract yourself. So now we're, you know, we're doing all these things. At the end, you're like, oh, I did that, but I didn't get anything else done. Or you forgot all the other things you had to do. So when you get busy, it's good. So these are two different apps that I recommend, but you can use a paper. I always use paper calendars. I did the same thing, right? I scheduled in not just my concrete items, I scheduled in my tasks as well. So instead of just having your tasks on the side that say these are all the things I have to write a report and all these things to do, it's easy to push them off, integrate them, and make them a time block on your calendar. Say, I'm giving myself 15 minutes to do this. I'm giving, you know, this is a quick thing. Send the IRB up. That's quick. I just have to fill out a form and send it. Okay, that's going to take me a few minutes. You know, I need a report. I'm writing a report on X, Y, and Z. I'm writing this case study report, and that's what I put in there, right? So I gave myself a half an hour. But is that the only half an hour? No, I'm giving myself a half an hour today. I'm giving myself 15 minutes tomorrow. I'm giving myself a half an hour the next day. So maybe I wrote it for half an hour. The 15 minutes is because I'm going to find more research and I'm going to proofread what I wrote, and I'm going to edit that before I move on. Then the next half hour I'm typing. Then I'm proofreading again. Later in the day, I'm going back to give myself a fresh mind. And then I went later in the day, you know, when I first get home, I proofread the paper that I wrote earlier. Maybe I gave myself a full hour, whatever the case may be. But again, making sure you're going through your day and you say, nope, it's 1 o'clock, I have to do this. And it keeps you on track, so you're not going, oh my goodness, the report is due. And you're trying to do it all at once or things like that. But these are two apps that do a lot of this work for you, and that's why I recommend them. So Structured is the name of the app. Structured.app is the website you would go to. So Structured. And this is a screenshot. This is not what I use now. I use Motion. Use Motion is the name of the website as well, but Motion is the program. So what I do, I switched over to Motion. I still have the paid version of Structured on my phone until I think a couple more months. But these are screenshots. I took these directly from my phone screen for today. You can see it's February 19th, and the other one I did February 20th because it was just a little bit more organized of the tasks than today because I was already halfway through today. Therefore, the tasks had rescheduled themselves, so I picked tomorrow instead, just so you could see the tasks on there. But on this case, I threw case study report in as an example, right? So now this is walking me through my day. So it's saying wake up 5 o'clock, right? So now I say, all right, I need to get up. This is starting my day. And it gave me enough time to wake up, 5 minutes. That's enough to wake up, right? But then I put showering and dressing. You're like, really? You had to put that on there? Yeah. I put showering and dressing. Now, I don't do that with Motion, but I do. But with Structured, that was how this works. So I put things like showering and dressing. What that meant was that I didn't just go, oh, I'm enjoying the shower, right? I gave myself 45 minutes, which means that I now sat in the shower and said, I have 45 minutes to get out of the shower because I have the next task to move on to. And it's making noise, and I can set alerts where it's telling me like, all right, move on to your next task, or hey, you got 5 minutes left. And this is colored. I realize that that's colored moving down, but you can see that I did this at 2:35, so 14:35. You can see where that color ends at the bottom. That was actually counting dots as it went down as well, telling me the time. So, but all these colors, you would actually see it, and I probably could have done that where it started a different day, but it would start where you now have half of that icon would be colored, and it continues going down. Great app. So, all right, I need to take my medication. It gave me 15 minutes to take my medication. It doesn't take me 15 minutes, but I put a little buffer in there, right? Because well, maybe my shower was too long, maybe I got a phone call, whatever. So I put my 15 minutes. Now, obviously, if I run over, I'm running. Now I can reschedule things. I can move things. A meeting took too long. Now I can rearrange my schedule on my own. I can do whatever I need. I gave myself 45 minutes to drive to work. Now, in reality, it takes me 36 minutes. But I gave myself 45 because that gives me a little bit of a buffer, right? It doesn't give me anxiety that I didn't get to my case study yet. And if I'm running ahead of schedule, that's even better, right? I'd rather be ahead of schedule. And the same thing. So now I give myself 45 minutes. It gives me time to, you know, kind of move it up at a steady pace. If I hit traffic, I'm not panicking. But when I get to work at 6:55, I have scheduled that I need to do my case study report. That's the first thing I'm going to do. Then the next task, and I do it. Now, if I have concrete things, those are also going to get scheduled in as concrete events, and those look a little different. So when I clicked on that screen, I clicked that this was a task. These are all tasks. If I went on there, I could put an actual concrete event on there, like a meeting or a class or something. That would also be on there as well. But I schedule these all as tasks. I can put icons that helps me visually say like, oh yeah, I didn't have to read it. I can see it and see how long it takes. Now the thing with structure, the only thing I didn't care for on that was that if I missed something, I missed that case study report because something else came up. I do have to go in there and manually reschedule that. Because I didn't do it, I do have to reschedule that on my own. I can check off all those little bubbles on the side and I can say that I did them, so now I know what I did and didn't do. You can break this down in different pieces. Research, write the abstract, write the report. I can do all of that. Now the key thing with a class, and we have a lot of online classes now, you need extreme time management. Because if you tune into my Zoom class and you guys all tuned in at what do we do? 5:30, right? You all tuned in at 5:30. Then what's going to happen is you have to be on the screen at 5:30. At 5:15, you all started to sign in, right? Now the problem is when you have an online class, put that on your calendar as you need, as a course. You find a time and you say, look, I got a blank space on Wednesday night. This is my online class time. And I recommend with online classes that you do that multiple times of the week, at least 3 times. Monday, sign in. Wednesday, sign in. Friday, you sign in, and then you write your initial discussion board. Wednesday, you check other people's discussion boards and you make an initial reply to them. You do any work that needs to be done now that you've been preparing and studying and listening to lectures throughout that time of the week. You've also been doing that. And then you move on to later on, you do more discussion board stuff, and then you continue, maybe your quizzes are at the end or whatever it be. The nice thing with Motion is that it does everything reschedule. It reschedules you automatically. So if I missed the transfer challenges, what that does is that takes it and it reschedules it to a different day, so that it's not that you don't miss it. Right? If I miss the IRB application that I have to do, that's why there's an exclamation point. It's telling me that it keeps rescheduling itself because I keep ignoring it. Okay, because I keep getting busy and I keep doing something else. So it's telling me, hey, this is past due because we keep rescheduling these things that you keep saying that you're going to do, and these things keep going. But I can also, I love this because with Motion, I can say, hey Siri, new Motion task. I'm in the shower when I do this. It says, what task would you like? Create an IRB application. It's going to take a half an hour. Divide that up over 10-minute segments. The hard due date is next week. Okay. And it schedules it for me. It takes the task, it breaks it up into 10-minute increments. It's going to take a half an hour. It's going to break it up into 3 10-minute increments. And it's going to say a hard deadline is that this needs to be done by next week. Or, hey, I have something due tonight, hard deadline. It needs to be due tonight. It's going to take me an hour and a half to write that report. So what it does is it knows how long it's going to take. It does it, and it did all by Siri. Put it on my calendar, and I love this because I'm in the shower when I'm telling it what to do. So sometimes things don't make sense, because it's whatever Siri thought I said. But it does put that stuff up, and it does make it easier. It does schedule it for you, and then it will schedule it around other events. I can also do booking on the bottom. I can send, if you look at the bottom of my email, you'll notice that there's a link that says schedule an appointment with, Professor Shea. It says by Zoom, by phone, or by email. So if I love this because I'm trying to do meetings and people are like, oh, well, what's available? Well, I set certain times that I say that I'm willing to meet with people. I told Motion this. So Motion knows to keep it within these timeframes. But if I all of a sudden schedule something else, how many times do you go back and forth and you're trying to schedule something and all of a sudden you're going back and forth with people and you're like, oh, I can do next Wednesday at 6 o'clock. Okay. And you keep going back and forth. And by the time that time comes, something else got scheduled during that time because somebody else says, hey, we have a meeting. Right. So in this case, when the person goes on, they automatically choose the time. It only tells you what's available. I put a half an hour buffer so you can't get too close to another meeting. If you're trying to schedule a in-person meeting with me, it won't let you do it until the next day. If it's phone or Zoom, I can do it the same day. So I have all these things, which makes it a little bit easier on you to schedule things. Or if you're trying to make a group project, you're like, all right, find a time that's available. Here's my link. And people can find things, but it bases around whatever else you put on there. So those are all different things. But again, time management helps when you're doing your schedule to help yourself. Again, stick with a routine, because if you do that, that's going to help you know what you have to do. Again, plan out every task, make time for different things, so that way you're not just saying, oh, I got all these things. You're making very specific time commitments, and then you say, I have to do this. This was my time to do this. But then colors and symbols also play a big role in this, because if you can see something, you're like, it'll catch your attention more than just black words. It's more exciting. And that's that. All right. Questions? Any questions about anything? Anything at all? I can answer. It doesn't have to be on part of the presentation. Any questions at all? No? No questions? You guys got all that? Right. Okay,
I
you
have
guys.
a question.
Yeah, good.
I'm trying to find the use motion. I think this is a great idea. It would really work for me with time management, because I have I'm scattered. I have so much to do.
Yeah, so am I.
And I think this would be great, but is there an app?
It's an app, yeah. So you can look in the App Store. But
I
you
tried
have
the App
the thing
Store.
with
What do I
Motion is
put
you
in?
have to set, yeah. So with Motion, there's an app, goes on your phone. But the thing with Motion is to get it set up when you do the app, it's going to tell you to go to the website. You have to go to the website and actually to set up the account.
Oh,
And then you
okay.
can then go to the app, and the app will start to work once you get it up. That's the only thing with Motion. Everything else you can do just the app, Speechify, and
So the other one you
Structure.
had on there is an app? The other one you
Structured
have.
was the other app.
Yeah.
The one that I had on the left was called, it's called Structured. Structured.app. If you go to their website, you'll have information. But there's an app on your phone as well for that. And then usemotion.com, I think it is, was the if you go to their website, it's definitely worth it. They do cost money. That's the only thing is they do cost money. But and if you're trying to schedule things out with like your family or your workplace, Motion has the ability to kind of have teams so that you can kind of work on projects together and things like that. So that's if you have other people, you can actually get a nice discount on that if one person pays for it out of an entire group, and then everybody pitches in towards that. The cost does go down, but then you also have access to everyone else's thing. So your family, your workplace, school, whatever you're doing, you can push projects to each other and can see how that works. So yeah, that works.
I'll look more into it. I think I have Apple, I have an iPhone, and I think that if I just put in time management, I might find something. And I think also with my my iPhone, I also have I could look up other calendars, because my calendar is pretty cool. I can really schedule things in that, but I like to keep that. Well, I should probably do it all in one thing though, right?
Yeah, both of those are amazing.
Then if
apps.
I have private things, I can put that on there too. It probably makes sense to put them all together.
Yeah, I mean the nice thing with Motion's like any other regular calendar, just with a lot of extra features, which I love. And the real thing I like about Motion is that if I miss something, it's going to reschedule it for me, because I'm the kind of person that will go days and go, oh, what was that? And I have to go back and I have to move forward and reschedule them.
Oh, that's a great
reschedules
idea.
all not the events, but
Is it expensive?
Yeah, so I love that feature. You check
Do you
things
know
out.
how much it is?
On there. Huh?
How much is it? Is it expensive?
It's a couple hundreds, but it's for the year, for the whole year.
Is it safe to put a credit card in, or should I do a gift card?
There's different plans, like anything else. There's different plans that you can get on them.
Is it safe to put a credit card in?
Yeah, you can put a credit card into it. Yeah,
and
then and you pay less for the year than you would by the month, like any other app.
Do you think it's safe to put a credit card number in it? It's okay. It's safe.
Oh yeah. No, it's safe. Yeah.
Okay.
And then. But the thing with that too is the nice thing with Motion is, let's say I check something off and say, I can go ahead and I can find something like today I write the IRB application, but that was on tomorrow's task list, that it scheduled it for tomorrow. And I can put a hard thing and saying, this is a task, but this task is specifically at this time frame. You can do that as well, versus a task where it floats around. But if I I can say, all right, I did the IV, I can scan through the days, find it, and I can check it off and say I already did that. And then it will fill that space in. So I have different things to do tomorrow because I already checked it
I
off.
like that because I like a checklist because I'm usually like deleting and then
I
adding
love
and
that.
deleting and it's a pain. I'd rather have
Yeah.
a checklist. That way I could still see it and say, oh yeah, I did do that. There's a check on it.
I love it. And again, if I'm in the middle of something, like I'm doing on other projects, and I'm always doing something that's not on the list. And if I'm doing something, all of a sudden the tasks are going to as I keep going, the tasks are actually rescheduling themselves as the timer goes past them. And if I don't check, so there's things I'm like, I may have done the task. I can go back and I can check things off later. That works. But yeah, the nice thing with that the thing with structured is the nice thing is that's colored and it goes down and it's very focused on you do this right now. And it's like,
Oh yeah.
so there's that, which is nice because it says, so you're like, okay, I have 15 minutes, which makes you rush because you're saying, okay, I need to write this report and I can't do anything else. I can't check my phone. I can't talk to anybody for the next 15 minutes. Because I put other things on there of like, I can talk to people. I put on check my phone. I did all of that. But now I'm on Facebook. And I gave myself 15 minutes to look on Facebook. Oh, sorry, the timer went off. 15 minutes, I'm done. I need to move back to my projects rather than getting absorbed in your social media.
Right.
You're now committing yourself to saying, I'm giving myself 15 minutes to do this. And you're, but because the thing is now driving you nuts, it gives you a little anxiety. It's good anxiety. It gives you that anxiety of, oh, I'm getting to the end, which means I have to focus. But I'm also committing myself of, okay, I only have 15 minutes to do this. I can write a report in 15 minutes. I can write this paper in 15 minutes because you're now committing that to you're saying, I'm only going to do this. I'm hyper focusing. I'm not doing this and going, oh, let me do these things. Nope. I have this because I have to beat the timer, and it does it. So I do like that. Yeah. It does help. It does help with that, but it also keeps you on a commitment, and it keeps your breaks on commitment as well. It will tell you like, hey, you're on like the dotted lines. It says you have a 7-hour break because I didn't schedule anything for that. So it was saying break, but
you can actually, it says you can start it.
Now,
it says you can start it for free too. It says start for free to try it.
Yeah, I think there's a free trial for it. Yeah, there's a free trial for that, but the nice thing with that is again, it keeps you on pace. But I'll schedule things in that I have to eat, and I might when I'm eating. Obviously it's hard for me to type things and write reports when I'm eating. So what I do is I'll schedule something in of saying when I'm eating, and I'll even if not the app, when I'm eating, that's my time to watch TV or my time to do something. So in my case, I never watch TV, but what I'll do is, at night, I'll say, okay, I cooked dinner. I'm doing something while I'm cooking dinner. Maybe I'm listening to something. Maybe I'm reading something. I'm stirring the pot and I'm reading something and then stir the pot. But then when I'm eating, my hands are occupied. So that's my time. I watch a movie.
I think it's good because there's a lot of, it sounds like it's good for structure because I'm very structure oriented.
It is good structure.
It sounds like it's very specific and I like that.
Oh yeah. And what I'll do is, but that's how I manage my life. So what I'll do is I'll say, okay, I have my big bowl of pasta and I'm eating my pasta and I'm laying on the couch while I do it. Okay. But while I snuggle with Ranger and I eat on the couch, I know as soon as I take the last spoonful of pasta, or, forkful of pasta, that my movie time is over. My TV time is over. I'll pause it, I'll stop it, and then I get right back to work. And, now that was my lunch. Now at night, I eat dinner, I'll watch the rest of the movie. And, so what it is I'm compartmentalizing things, but I'm not just saying, oh, I'm going to watch a movie. Oh, next one, right? I just say, I can only watch TV if I'm eating at the same time. So I make rules. Making rules for yourself is important. I make rules for myself. I make rules that I can only do this if I do this. I can only, take a shower if I listen to my book. I don't know. But you can make rules and just say, this is my leisure time. I'm allowed to do this. I check my phone. I only check social media while I'm on the toilet. All right, well, that's a limited period of time. And you know what? Because rather than me saying I can only have 15 minutes, I had 15 minutes on the toilet. So if I'm on the toilet, then I have my social media time. I'm just making stuff up here, but you get the gist of, there's a point where you're like, okay, I'm done. Boom, back to my work. Rather than sitting there saying, oh, this was cool, and you're scanning through all your friends, and you lose track of time because you're not tying it to something else. Or I'm allowed to look at my social media while my food is cooking. Now, I'm also stirring my pot, but while my food is cooking, and I'm monitoring that to make sure it doesn't burn, then I'm able to do my I'm able to search, with my social media. But once that timer goes off, my food is done, my social media time is done. So you're tying leisure items you're getting leisure, but you're tying your leisure items to
So
something
you
that's.
actually put on a timer for everything?
My timer, well, yes, I do. Well, with structured and motion, I have my timers, but with, but like my dinner, like if my dinner is cooking and I'll say it has to boil for 15 minutes, the timer's the oven timer that says 15 minutes. So once my pasta is ready, I'm eating. I'm done. Social media time is over because I tied my addictive behavior to something that I know is a restricted period of time. If I continue doing social media and I don't get that pot off the stove, my dinner's about to burn, right? So I know that I'm tying it to something, very, very limited. Or I'm in the passenger seat of the car while someone's driving. That's my social media time. And therefore, while someone else is driving, I'm able to do that. Or I check emails. That's what I'll do a lot of. I'll check my emails while someone else is driving, not myself, but I'll check my emails. And I'm having a conversation with them, but I'm able to check my emails. I'm able to reply. And then I now know that when I'm at my office, I'm not focusing on my emails. I'm focusing on my work. I always have the email going because I have to. But, I say, all right, I'm going to do this task and then I'll check my emails. Okay, do this task and I check my emails. And I check emails between every task, unless I'm paying attention to names and it's the vice president, then obviously I'm going to reply a little quicker. Things like that. Yeah, so just tying things to other tangible items. Yeah, because it keeps you responsible.
Thank you. I'm going to find some usefulness out of that. I think I like that idea.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
thank you. Thanks for the suggestions.
Absolutely. Yeah, and if anybody has any questions, I know we lost a few there, but if anybody has questions, you can always reach me at my email to first initial last name at capecod.edu. Always happy to answer questions and find creative ways to make things happen. All right. Very good. Hope you guys learned something.
Thanks, Professor Shea.
You're welcome.